Hey guys, Phil Harris here. So listen, in this video, I'm going to give you a complete guide to DJing. My goal is to make a video that's so good, you never have to buy another DJ course ever again. I just want to give it all away. I just want to teach you as much as I possibly can. That is my goal of this video. Now, you can see how long this video is. I have no idea how long it's going to be. I've come down, it's like 10 to 6 in the morning. I'm just going to teach and teach and teach. I've got some notes here about what I'm going to teach, which I'm going to run you through. Now, what I am going to say is I'm going right from the basics. So if you've never DJed before in your life, I'm going to take you all the way to a point where you're going to be able to go out and confidently DJ a festival in this video. But you might not be right at the beginning of your journey, right? So you might know some of the basic stuff. So what I've also done is I've segmented this video. You see that little red cursor at the bottom of the video? You can scroll along and you'll see all the different sections of this video. If you go into the description or one of the comments below, you'll see all the different parts of the video and you can just jump to that part that suits you. There should be something in this video for every single DJ out there. It's super exciting, you know? I've never seen a video like this on YouTube, so I'm really excited about it. So what I'm gonna do, because this is an intro, I'm gonna give you a super quick run through of everything I'm gonna be covering. But like I said, you can see these different sections below. And I might even add in additional sections that I haven't even written down here. This is not necessarily like pre-planned, okay? So that's what we're gonna do. Now, just quickly before I run you through this, just want to say my name's Phil Harris. I've been a professional DJ for 10 years. I've been teaching this for ages. Obviously, this is my YouTube channel. I'm also heavily active on Instagram, so you can go and follow me there at Phil Harris Music. You can follow along with my DJ journey. It's really cool, daily DJ tricks and tips. Now, obviously the plan of this video is to make sure you never need another DJ course in your life. But just as a side note, I do have DJ courses, which I'll leave below. Hopefully you don't need, but I'll put them there anyway. And then there's another thing which I wanted to mention to you. A massive part of DJing these days, if you think about it, is making your own music. If you think of the top DJs on the planet, you know, a lot of them like David Guetta, Marshmello, Chainsmokers, they're really there because of their numbers on Spotify. In other words, they got really, really popular songs. So what I'm going to teach you is how to go out and DJ festivals. But unfortunately, the reality of DJing these days is you've got to be making your own music. Now, don't sigh when I say that, because the reality is making music is awesome. It's really, really fun. And I will teach you how to make professional music. Just in case you're like, who is this guy? Just go to Spotify, type in Phil Harris. You can go and listen to my music. I make tech house music. I DJ tech house music. So if you want me to teach you how to make professional music, I also run a mentorship program over 6 months where I'll work with you, even if you've never made music before, to a point where you can make professional music every single time. So that's a little bit of a drop of all the different stuff that I kind of, you know, courses and stuff I do. But like I said, let's get on with the video. So this is what I'm going to be covering. I'm going to start with what is DJing. Then I'm going to cover the basics of DJ decks. Now, I've decided to teach on the DDJ FLX4. Okay, these are one of the most popular DJ decks out there, which is why I'm choosing to teach all of this stuff on here, because I think that if you're brand new, you're going to be starting on entry-level DJ decks. However, I've got the CDJ 3000s, which I'm also going to do a little section on at the end of this video. Why is it important to know about the CDJ 3000s? Well, because they're club standard, right? Now, I know there's a bit of a, you know, people are not necessarily happy that they're club standard. People think there should be a whole range of DJ decks. But the reality is, whether you go to London, Las Vegas, Bali, and you walk into any club, the DJ decks that you're going to see in front of you are CDJ 3000. So it's also important that you have a bit of knowledge about these, because if you get on a festival stage, they're the DJ decks you're going to be looking at. So I'm going to teach on these, and at the end I'm going to do a small section on the CDJ 3000s. I'm going to be covering DJ software. I'm going to be covering where to get your music from. I'm going to be covering things like BPM and Grid that might not even make any sense to you yet, but it will soon. I'm going to be showing you about mixing in key, which is important because it'll teach you kind of like how to make your mix sound perfect. Again, I'm going to be covering all this. I'm going to be covering things like hot cues, memory points, cue buttons. I'm going to be covering where to set your hot cues. This might all sound like gobbledygook to you, but don't worry, we're going to be covering it. It's all important parts of DJing. Understanding effects. I'm going to be covering covering beat matching for beginners. I'm going to be covering phrases, beats, bars, and phrases, which is really important because it'll teach you where, at what point in the track you need to transition from one track to another. It's a really critical part of DJing that. I'm going to be teaching you how to transition from one BPM to another BPM. I'm not even going to begin to explain it. I'm just telling you what I'm going to be covering. I'm going to be talking about mastering beat matching by ear, introducing headphones into mixing. I'm going to show you how to actually mix different frequencies from one track to another so it begins to blend really nicely. I'm going to be teaching you about the sync button and why it's controversial and why loads of DJs seem to don't like it, but I'm going to be covering that as well. I'm going to be showing you emergency transitions. So if it all went wrong on the dance floor, it's like, oh, we just need to get away from this song to another song quickly. How to do that without looking like an absolute idiot. Mixing between different genres. So what if you've got house music and you want to go to drum and bass or hip hop or a completely different genre? I'm going to be showing you that. I'm going to be showing you kind of some like James Hype stuff and what he does, because let's face it, he's like one of the most technical DJs out there. I'm going to show you a couple of the things that he does that allows him to do the stuff he does. Then I'm going to show you the difference between CDJs and these, and then I'm going to end with some kind of final words of advice. Now, I probably could have saved 5 minutes then by not reading that out, because you could have gone to the bottom of the video and seen all of this anyway. But to be honest with you, we're in this for the long haul, guys. We could be here for the next couple of hours. So make sure you bookmark this, make sure you grab your popcorn, and I'm also going to try and be as efficient as I can in this video. I know it's going to be a long video, so I'm going to try and get through it as quickly as possible so you're not sitting there bored at any point. And hopefully that wasn't too boring for you and you're pumped and you're ready to go. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay guys, so we're going to start with the most basic question. What is DJing? So technically, DJing is the art of transitioning from one song into another song seamlessly, so your audience kind of feel like they're just listening to one massive song progression and everything kind of flows back and forth. That's technically what you're doing as a DJ. But I can tell you, as a professional DJ, what you're really doing is playing music that the audience in front of you like dancing to and are enjoying. That's basically what it all comes down to. If I had 3 minutes with you before you went to do a DJ set, we wouldn't actually be discussing technically how to DJ. We'd just be putting together a very, very good playlist of songs. Remember this, and I'm only going to say this once, but I've been to events where people are going crazy and dancing around like mad people to an iPod that's plugged in. And I've also been to events where the DJ is playing music that no one knows and he's doing technical transitions and no one's dancing. And I can tell you which party I'd rather be at. The one where everyone's dancing and screaming and singing along to their favorite tunes. So that's the most important thing. Let's move on to the next section of the video. Okay guys, so I'm going to start with DJ software. Now I just want to explain, these DJ decks here are just controllers. So they have to be plugged into a laptop in order to control what's actually going on a computer program, right? So you could technically DJ from your laptop if you wanted to, but really you want to master the DJ decks. So you have to have software. Now there's two main programs. There's Serato and Recordbox, and of course there's loads of others as well. And I'm not necessarily saying one is better than the other. Just so you know, they all basically do the same kind of thing. That's basically it. Once you can kind of understand one program, you can switch over to another program in basically an hour or so. It takes no time at all. So really do not stress about this. If you have Serato and you've got DJ decks that are compatible with Serato, use Serato. If you've got DJ decks that are compatible with Recordbox, go ahead and use them. Just to explain to you, the reason why I made the switch from Serato over to Recordbox is because I wanted to start DJing in clubs. And as I mentioned, the standard DJ decks in clubs are CDJ 3000s. And the software that you need in order to DJ with the CDJ 3000s is Recordbox. And again, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I'm going to probably do this quite a lot throughout the video. Just in case you didn't know, with these DJ decks controllers, you will only ever control stuff that's on the program. So music that is in the program will be controlled by these. When you go to a club, you actually just take a USB with you. So it's very similar, but essentially what you do is once you've got a playlist, you export it onto a USB, and that's the USB you go and you plug into the CDJ 3000s. So the CDJ 3000s are not controllers, whereas this is a controller. Hopefully that makes sense. So I don't know if I mentioned this, but the software that is compatible with CDJ 3000s is Rekordbox. It also works well with DDJ 400s, DDJ FLX4, which just so happen to be the most popular DJ decks on the planet, entry-level DJ decks, which is why I'm using this. So I just wanted to kind of cover myself there, but the stuff I'm going to be teaching you in this video is not going to be in-depth about Rekordbox. I'm just going to be showing you the absolute basics you need to know, which is essentially loading music in and loading music onto the decks and creating a playlist. So I'm just going to cover that. So if I come down here, we can see this is what Rekordbox looks like, okay? And I've obviously got some music in here. So this is what it will look like. And as soon as you plug your DJ decks in, it should go to a different mode. So let's go ahead and do that now. Just going to plug these in. And the second you plug them in, you usually get a pop-up like this that tells you to update it. No one ever does. If you're anything like me, I just hit close because I just can't be bothered with it. And you see it's jumped to this mode here, which is performance mode. And you can kind of see like there's one deck over here, one deck over here. So you kind of begin to get an idea of what's going on. Now, obviously, there's lots of switches, knobs, buttons. Let's just stick to the basics so we can get you going. So essentially, you want to come to, it'll say collections, all audio, all videos, and you won't have any playlists. But if you come onto playlist here and click on it, there's a little button here called plus. This is the way you would create a playlist. So you hit this little plus button here. Let's hit that. And you can see it creates a playlist over here, which you can come and you can just like double click in and then you can call it playlist or whatever you want, okay? Now, a little note on playlists, okay? Essentially, my top tips when it comes to creating playlists is if you are going to a club and you're going to be playing a tech house DJ set, you can essentially have one playlist. When I go and play Ministry of Sound now, and I know I've got an hour slot and I'm playing tech house all night, the reality is I know what songs I'm playing before I go and play that DJ gig. I've got them all there. Maybe there's a couple of extras so I can swap them out if I want, but I've got a really good idea. And I know I'm playing tech house music all night because I'm being employed to go and play tech house music, right? So I will go with one playlist. However, I used to DJ at weddings, and you can't go with one playlist because when you go and DJ at a wedding or just a broader event where you've got a wider spectrum of people there, you need to have playlists that people are going to like, or if you're going to play a house party. And so my top tip for you when it comes to playlists is don't have too many songs in the playlist, okay? Just keep your playlist nice and tight, you know, like 20, 30 songs in each. And the general kind of playlist you could create would be popular hip hop songs, you know, songs that everybody's gonna know, popular dance songs, pop songs, throwback songs, you know, like just kind of old school songs that everybody knows, like the Killers, stuff like that. Then you could obviously have like indie rock, you know, this kind of stuff works well at weddings, like Blink-182, Killers, all that kind of stuff. And you're just gonna get the top hits, okay? And then of course, if you're playing like for people over the age of 50, you might want to get things like Motown tracks in there, which would be like Stevie Wonder, all of those kind of tracks. So I mean, you could go down a rabbit hole, but everything I mentioned there would typically be what I would go and play a wedding when I used to do weddings with, right? And the main thing is, what you do with playlists is you want to figure out what your audience likes, okay? So you'll dive into one, you'll go, right, we're just going to start off with pop tracks, and you play it. And if people come on the dance floor, you play more pop tracks. If you're like, oh, this isn't really working, let's try a hip hop track, and everyone goes crazy, you play more hip hop songs. And it really is that. Now, this is the part of DJing that no one really talks about, which is what you've got to get good at is reading the room, guessing what you think they're going to like, and playing more of that, okay? It really is as basic as that. So that's kind of like the psychology behind playlists. Everyone's always interested, like, you know, what playlist should we have? That's basically it, okay? So the next thing is you've got to go and get your music. Now I'm going to create a whole other section of where to get music. So let's just stick with the program for now. So let's say I've got one song here, an ABBA remix, okay? You've got your music. Another thing to note is I would get yourself a good external hard drive, something that's going to hold all your music. You don't want to store all your music on a laptop because it'll make your laptop really sluggish and slow, and it's going to get frustrating. So if you store all your music on an external hard drive, then it keeps your computer really quick, okay? So that's another really important tip for you. Another tip is I would actually put your music into specific folders on your hard drive, because then it's really easy if you ever needed to move your music onto a different computer to go in and just create new playlists from the folders you have on your hard drive, grab all that music and drag it in. Okay, and it really is as simple as dragging it in. So say for example right now I had 3 songs in a folder. I could click Control A or Apple A, which would select all of them, and you just get it and you just drag it literally into your playlist like this. So far we've covered a playlist and we've covered how to drag and drop music in. Now when you drag and drop it in, you'll see it kind of loads for a second where it'll create like the wave form here. It'll give you the name, it'll give you the key, which I'm going to come on to later on, and it'll give you the BPM here as well. Okay, so it'll kind of load in information and it'll just kind of figure this stuff out for you. So now we've got our music in a playlist. Getting it onto the different decks on here is as simple as grabbing it and dragging and dropping. You see when I drag it up, it goes to a white box there, and you can drop it like that. That's now loaded on this deck, and if I was to do the same over on the other side, it's loaded on this deck. Now, I'm going to leave it there for now, but we will jump back into the software later on, and I'll show you more technical stuff later on. But the one thing I do want to note is notice when I move these up and down here on the screen, the volume goes up and down there as well. So we know that this is now controlling a lot of the parameters in the software. Okay, cool. Let's move on to the next bit of the video. Okay, in this part of the video, I want to teach you where to get your music from. Ultimately, it's the most important part of DJing, and a lot of new DJs are like, where do we go to get music from? So I'm just going to give you a plethora of places you could go. Okay, so first things first. For inspiration, you want to go to places like Spotify. You can obviously go to Spotify, you can search for playlists and stuff like that. So again, if you're into hip-hop, you can type in hip-hop, you'll find so many different playlists with new hip-hop that's being released. You could type in throwback hip-hop, you can type in whatever you want to get inspiration. Now, of course, the cool thing about Spotify is if you create your own playlist, Spotify will recognize what songs you like and then recommend other songs for you. So it's a really, really good place to go to get inspiration for music. Now, the next place you can go is YouTube. So you can go to YouTube and type in one of your favorite artists, like James Hype, for example, watch one of his DJ sets, listen to it, and sometimes people will have put the track list in the comments, or you could just get on your phone and get Shazam and hold it up and listen to the track that he's playing, and then it'll tell you what the song is, and then you'll know what the song is to go and get it. This is more kind of inspiration, where you go to get ideas for the music you want to download, okay? Now, another website you can go to is called Tracklist, 1001 track list, okay? And what this is you can go here and type in any of your favorite artists, and it will give you the actual playlist of all the different tracks they've played. So you could go search for your favorite artist and actually look at the different songs that they're playing, so you can find them to go and get them at a later point. Once you've got a good list of songs, the next thing is to go and actually download them or get them, okay? So places you could go to download songs, obviously you've got iTunes, you can go there, you can download music there. You can go to Beatport, this is a great one, for some reason it's not loading, but essentially this is like a DJ site, so you can go here and there's different genres of music you can go, and there's Beatport charts, and you know, a lot of the top DJs will go to the Beatport charts to find what's really hot at the moment, okay? So that's a really good one, Beatport, and you can go and look at these in your own time. We've got Track Source as well, and you know, this is another place you can go and download music. Bandcamp is another place you can go and download music. Juno Download is another place. SoundCloud is really cool. What's cool about SoundCloud is a lot of DJs will go and upload bootlegs and mashups and remixes onto this website, and there'll often be a free download link that you can go and get, so you can actually download free music off SoundCloud as well. There's other things you can do. You can go to record pools. These are pretty cool. You can sign up for a membership and essentially download as much music as you want, and they will also have really cool remixes, mashups, stuff like that, which is pretty cool. Obviously it's cool playing remixes and mashups out because it gives your audience just a different flavor of a track. You can get a track that's popular and play a remix of it, and it just makes you look cooler as a DJ. So different record pools is a BPM Supreme is one, Zip DJ is one, DJ City is one. And remember, with all of this stuff, you can just go ahead and Google it. So for example, if you were like, where can I go to download music? You just go to Google and type in download music, and there'll be a load of websites you can go. Or if you're looking for DJ pools, you can just go and type in DJ pools and it'll bring up a ton. So if I miss any, don't worry, you can always just go and Google these at a later point. Now, there's also ways these days that you can actually stream music, okay? So Beatport, you can actually stream music. So it's a bit like you would with Spotify, but straight to your DJ decks. So Beatport is one, and there's another one called BeatSource, which is pretty cool for streaming music. But again, there's probably loads. If you were to type in DJ stream music, you'd find a ton, okay? Now, I also wanted to touch on briefly actually making your own music. So I use a program called Ableton, and this is a program you would use to create your own music from scratch. I'm not going to talk about this for very long, but as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, a lot of the top DJs on the planet are making their own mashups, remixes, and original tracks, and they will do it on programs like Ableton. And there's others like FL Studio, Logic, but a lot of my favorite artists are using Ableton. I use Ableton. It's awesome. So if you were interested in making your own music, you could go and get a free trial of this. And if you want to learn more, you can obviously get in touch. Just message me on Instagram if you want to learn more. So now there's one other thing which I wanted to mention, which is kind of risque, but it's a program called ClipGrab. This is highly illegal, and you should not use this. But essentially what this is, you can download it, and any track on Spotify, you can go and grab the URL and then drop it into ClipGrab and illegally download it. And then you go into jail. You're going to jail. So if you do that, you're gonna, you're gonna spend time. So there's that. And something else I want to mention as well, often you can just go to Google and type in SoundCloud download. And you can go to SoundCloud, go onto a track, make sure it's not a playlist or anything like that, and it's an individual track. You can go and grab the URL, and then you go to a SoundCloud download website, drop and paste it in, and you can download it. So there you go. You do it, you're going to jail, okay? Nothing to do with me. So that's essentially where you can go to get inspiration for music, and where to download music. And look, in my opinion, if you're starting out and you just want to have, you're just DJing in your bedroom, I think just rip it, basically. Anyway, there we go. So that's where to get music. Oh, and actually, I do want to say one other thing. The reason why people are against ripping stuff is because it can be lower quality, and if you were to play it on a big sound system, it might sound worse. And obviously there's the risk, if you're downloading it from an actual music video, they might be like talking over it halfway through the song, and that would make you look very bad. If you downloaded a track from a music video and there's like a car race and there's cars screeching in the background and you play that out live, you are gonna look like a fool. But the one thing I will say is, I can't really tell the difference. If I was to play, and I've played music on big sound systems and good sound systems from like ClipGrab and music that I've downloaded, and I've A/B'd and I've gone back and forth, and I can't really tell the difference. Technology is very good these days, so that's the reason why people are against it. And obviously people are against it because the artists don't get any money. But let's face it, we live in a world now where everything is streamed anyway. I've got hundreds of thousands, millions of streams on Spotify. I make absolutely no money on Spotify at all. I'd much rather people rip my music and actually play it than not buy it and not play it as an artist. So that's just another little note for you. Okay, so I'm going to have a whole section here just on BPM and Grid. Okay, so let me just explain this to you. First things first, BPM stands for beats per minute. Okay, so every single track has got a beat, right? A faster beat will have more beats per minute than a slower beat. Okay, so if a track was 160 beats per minute, it's a fast track. Or if it's 90 beats per minute, it's a slower track, okay? Now, beats per minute is very relevant to DJing. The reason it's relevant is because we need to blend from one track to another track. So a lot of the time, we've got to make sure the two tracks are the same beat and the beats are aligned. If we get the one beat from one track to another beat of another track, we can blend from one to the other, and it just feels like people are just constantly dancing to the same song. So it's really, really relevant, this. This is why I wanted to give it its own section, in case you didn't know what beats per minute were. Now, the second thing which I want to teach you about is grid. Now, as we just talked about, a lot of DJs, well, all music is made these days on like programs, on a computer program, right? And the way it would work is, say you had a kit with you would set that to a grid, and you just say, like, basically just hit that beat on the beat for 128 beats per minute. So like, you know, like think of a metronome, like tick, 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 tick. Well, on music production software, you set the metronome and you put a kick and you just say repeat the kick. So then you go dum, 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 dum. It's made on a computer program and it's made electronically. Now, this is all relevant, right? Because there was a time once when the dinosaurs existed where people would actually play real instruments, right? And the thing with that is there's room for error. If I was to clap my hands to a beat, I'm gonna get it wrong. It's never wrong on a computer program, right? I could set a loop on my DJ decks and on, you know, have this track and this track set to a loop on 2 tracks that have been made on a computer program and walk away for 100 years and come back and it's digitally perfect. They will still be lined up perfectly. You can't do that when you've got real instrumentalists, okay? So then we come to a grid. So if you look at the computer program here, we can see this grid. Now, we can actually see the beats. Now, I can see instantly that this grid is off. So I'm gonna come here to export mode, okay? And we're gonna set this grid properly. This is really, really important. You need to make sure that the music that you've got loaded in is set to a grid properly because it's gonna help you so much when it comes to actually DJing live. Now, the record box or whatever software you're using will try and set the grid, but as we can see here, it's got it wrong, which I'm glad it has because I can show you this. So we've come to export mode and I'm now going to come to grid, right? And let's see if we can zoom in a little bit here. Oh, you can. Cool. Here we go. Now, check it out. Every single track has got 4 beats to a bar. Okay, so it just goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4. These are bars, and there's 4 beats to a bar. That's just the case in all music. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole. Just memorize that. This is important. Okay, you need to know about beats, bars, and phrases. I've got a whole section on that coming up. So we can see 1, 2, 3, 4. And if I was to play it, for some reason it's not playing. So I'm going to come to the top here and go to preferences. And I'm going to come to audio. I'm just going to change it to built-in output here, just so we can actually hear it. I do apologize, my computer is unbelievably slow. This computer is just designated for DJ stuff and I haven't updated it for ages. So, right, now we can hear it, okay? So if I come to the beginning here, we need this first grid to hit here. Now, something else which I haven't mentioned is, you know, I just mentioned beats and bars. The beginning of a bar will always be a red line and then the others will be white, or I think here you can see it's blue, but there'll always be a red bar, a red line for the beginning of a bar. So we know this track is 128 BPM, okay, because it's figured it out and we can see it works. We can see it kind of, well, I'll come on to how we know that's true in a second, okay? So we want to set this to the beginning here. Now, just to show you how to do this in Recordbox, you just come to grid, you just hit this button here, and it'll bump it along, and now instantly we can see that's going to the grid nicely, okay? So we now know this is set to the grid. Now, how do we know that 128 is right? Well, I want to come along further in the track and see if it still looks like it's fitting to the grid perfectly later in the track. So I'll come to here, and I can still see it's going to the grid pretty well. And I can come and I can even listen to it, and you can kind of visually see that the beat lands every time it passes this red line in the middle. Like that, and I can come further along in the track and I can still see it's fitting to the grid. So we know this is 128. Sometimes it might get it wrong, and sometimes it might say 28.23 or something like that. No one writes music to 128.23, so you can pretty much bet your bottom dollar it's 128. So if you wanted to change it, you just come and click in that, and then you can just type it in whatever it is, right? And then you go right back to the beginning of the track, and you set that first beat to the grid. Okay, so now hopefully I've explained to you the importance of BPM and making sure it goes to the grid, and you just need to understand this for other stuff that's coming up in the video later on. Okay, so in this part of the video I'm going to be talking to you about mix in key. Now I know you're probably thinking, Phil, there's a hell of a lot of theory here, let's just get into the DJ decks, but this is so important, this stuff. So let me just explain mixing in key for somebody who just knows nothing about music theory at all. So essentially, if you kind of pictured a keyboard, right, in front of you, when you write a song, the song is written in a key. And what that means is certain notes are being used because certain notes sound nice together and certain notes sound horrible together. Like there's certain keys you can hit on a keyboard. If you hit them at the same time, it's like they just clash and they sound horrible. So you've got to use notes that complement each other. And that's how all music is written, okay? Now you need to understand that because when it comes to DJing, we will have songs that are in certain keys. Now, in the same way with notes that will clash with each other, if you have two different tracks that are in clashing keys, or if you were to mix from one to another and they overlaid each other and they were in clashing keys, it could sound really horrible, right? So it's quite important to make sure you're mixing keys that complement each other, okay? Now, there's a whole, like, you know, we could go into a whole rabbit hole about this, but the main thing you need to know is this is particularly important if you're going to start doing mashups. If you're going to get a vocal from one track and put it over an instrumental of another track, you need to make sure they're exactly the same key because you need to make sure the vocal sits perfectly over the key of the instrumental. Now, I'm probably going to come on to this later on, but just in case you did want to do that, the way you do it is you just go to YouTube and you type in whatever it is, Eminem song name a cappella, and you'll find people have literally ripped the vocal away from the track, so you've just got the vocal with no instruments. And then you could go to another track that you like, whatever that is, and you type in the track name and then you type in instrumental. And sometimes you can actually find people have done the opposite. They've taken the vocals out. So as a DJ, this is pretty cool because now, as long as you know that they're in the same key and the same BPM, you can line them up on top of each other and it should sound good, okay? Now, I'll kind of go on to remixes later on. I'm going to make a note of doing that, but that's really important. Now, what I will say as a DJ who's done it professionally, more often than not, the part of the song you are mixing is the intro and the outro, which I'm going to be coming on to more in a bit. But the intro and the outro of the song, if you think of a dance song, you know it sometimes just comes in with a beat and it ends with a beat. Well, that's for the DJ to mix. And there's not usually that many instruments going on the intro and outro. So I'll just tell you this. I'm going to tell you all about mixing in key now, but as someone who DJs professionally, I don't actually worry that much about mixing in key because the intro and the outro don't often have many instruments that would clash. Drums in a track don't have a key, right? If you think about it, drums are like doom, tsh, doom, tsh. There's no like tone to that. Whereas if you sing a note, like that, that's got a key to it, that's got a note. So drums are more percussive and bass lines and chords have notes. So as soon as they have things like that, they run the risk of clashing. So an intro and an outro typically don't really clash that much. Plus, and I know I'm riffing on this, but I just want to kind of teach you stuff, right? So here's the reality. Say you're playing a DJ set and you're playing an absolute banger that people love and you're like, oh, I know what song they're gonna like. They're gonna like this one, right? And you bring it in and oh my gosh, they're in clashing keys. Shock horror. There are some people out there, some purists out there who would say, no, what you've got to do is join them. So you'll go from this song to this song, which is in a similar key, and then to this song, which is a similar key. So you can finally land on that song. Then you've done the transition from keys that work well with each other, from this one to this one. And I think, what a load of nonsense. What happens if you've got a banger and you want to play this other banger and those two tracks in the middle are not bangers? You've lost the audience. I'm telling you now, as somebody who DJs professionally, you want people in your room. You're often going to be playing a club where you're not the only person there, right? Like, people can choose to leave your room if they don't like the music. Think of all the times you've been drunk in a nightclub and you're like, oh, I hate this song. You just leave the room, right? And so you've got to think about this. This is the most important stuff. I'm saying this a lot, but it's important. Even if you got to a point you're playing a festival, there's going to be other tents people can go to. So I don't worry about mixing in key. And honestly, the way I do it is I'll just go find a playlist of songs that I like. And I actually, if you want to know the truth, I order the songs in order of the songs I love the most, down to the songs that obviously I'm playing songs that I love, but I just play the biggest songs first. Because you just want to keep them, you just want to get them excited, you know? So that's how I do it. Anyway, we've gone way off on a tangent, but hopefully you can kind of appreciate these thoughts in my head. Hopefully it helps you in some way, shape or form. So let's go back to key. So as we know, keys could be things like all the different notes on the keyboard are like, A, B, C, D, E, all this kind of stuff. But luckily for you, you don't have to memorize what keys work well together, because in the DJ world, they're coded, right? So you can see here underneath key, it says 12A, 8A, 2A, 4A, right? Those relate to scales like C major, A minor, blah, 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 right? But we don't have to memorize those and which work well together. All we need to know as DJs is that a 2A and a 2A is the same key. So if you blend from one of those songs to another song, it's going to sound perfect. They're in identical keys. Now, the next thing you need to know is you want to go from, if you are going to change key, keys that will typically sound really good together is a 2A to a 3A, or a 2A to a 1A. So up or down 1. And I think you can even go up or down 2. And there's some DJs that would argue you can go up and down 3. Really, the bottom line is you just got to use your ears. But it will sound really good going up or down 1 or 2. Now, you're also going to notice there's A and B. A, here's the thing, I don't know. A, I think is minor, and B, I think is a major scale. Now, you can go from 2A to 2B. But you shouldn't really go from a 2A to a 3B. You can start to get into clashing territory there, okay? And I just want to keep this as simple as possible. Two keys that will work perfectly together are exactly the same. And typically you can go up or down 1 or maybe 2, as long as it's an A or a B. Or you can sidestep across from a 2A to a 2B. And if you do that and you follow that, your mix will sound perfect. And that's basically it, honestly. And by the way, the thing you want to go and check out is if we go to here, you can type in harmonic wheel, okay? This is what you want to go and search for. And just go to images, and it's going to show you this, right? So we come to this and open this up here, and we can see on this wheel, the bigger image, we can see 11B a major, so I was right about B being major and A being minor, and you can see how they all relate. And so if you were to look at this, you can go 1 to either side. So I'm basically saying the same thing I said a second ago. So 12B, you could go to 1B, or 11B, or you can go in. So you can go down 1. So you can go from 12B to 12A, and then you can go side to side, or like I said, you could go to either side, okay? That's all you really need to know about it. It's not rocket science. Once you know that, you can just use it every single time. Now, there's another thing that I want to stress to you here. The software that you use, Rekordbox, Serato, all of the others, will go ahead and they'll have algorithms that'll just guess what these keys are, okay? They don't always get it right. Okay, now I would say if you're starting out on your journey, just use the built-in detection software in Rekordbox or whatever software you're using. However, I find the most reliable, and I'm not getting paid to say this, by the way, but I find the most reliable software is called Mix-In Key, which is a completely independent software that looks like this. I've got Mix-In Key 10, it's probably on Mix-In Key 13 by now. But essentially, this is a software that's really quite good at detecting keys. And so I find myself using this first. So what I would typically do is, say I had a track or a load of songs. Let me just move these out of the way so I can get to the flipping thing there. I can get a song and I come and drop it into Mix-In Key before, that didn't work. Here we go, do it again. Before putting it into Rekordbox. Now what this does is it takes that song, figures out what the key is, and attaches it to that song prior to bringing it into Rekordbox. So what I've got now is a just slightly more reliable program. Again, I'm not telling you it's like critical, I'm just telling you what I do, okay? And I know a lot of other DJs do this as well. I know James Hype does it, I know David Guetta, like a lot of the top DJs do it. It's just slightly more reliable, but as I just mentioned a second ago, completely pointless because I don't mix in key 90% of the time. Now, if you're gonna use this, we come back to Rekordbox, you have to make sure that you disable record box figuring out the key is, because we've already figured it out in mixing key. So you put it in mixing key first, let it run through, and then you get those songs and drag them into a playlist. So if I come to record box, you just have to go to preferences, and then you go to analysis, and you just turn off key and phrase here. Well, just key basically. And now when you load it in, it will take the existing key that has been attached to it from mixing key, okay? This might sound really complicated. Hopefully it's not. It's really very basic. And remember, I don't really mix in key anyway myself. So that's everything on mixing key. I don't think there's much more to be said on that. So we'll move on to the next section of the course. Okay, we've been here about an hour and we haven't even discussed the DJ decks yet. So let's get into it. I'm going to teach you the absolute basics of these DJ decks. I'm going to try my hardest not to go down a rabbit hole with each of these things and just explain it in the simplest and easiest way possible. So, right, let's do this. First things first, if you want to get back to this mode with the DJ decks on either side of the decks, you just got to click this and go to performance mode instead. That's where we need to be for this, okay? So, looking at these DJ decks, I'm going to pretend you've never seen DJ decks before in your life, and I'm just going to explain it. So, you'll see that this section here and this section here are identical. They are identical. So, you only really need to learn that much, and then this section here, because once you know this, okay? This will control lots of things to do with that track, and same with this side. And then this section here is primarily used for mixing from one track to another. Then this section here is just effects, and all DJ decks will be slightly different, but once you kind of understand this, you're laughing. And then this is kind of like master settings. Okay, so let's just dive into it. First things first, play and pause button. That's obvious. I don't need to insult your intelligence there. Then we've got the cue button. This is really important, okay? So with DJing, you don't often want to come in right from the beginning of the track. Sometimes you want to come in a little bit further in. So let's say, for example, I wanted to come in 1 bar in, 4 beats, 1 bar in, okay? I can put my finger on this platter, and you probably work this bit out. This will move the track forward or back. It does a little bit more than that. We'll come on to that in a moment. So I can move forward on the screen 1 bar to here, and take my finger off and it'll stay there because I haven't got it playing. It's technically paused, right? Now I can hit the cue button, and now I've set this point that I may want to bring the track in from. But the cue button does so much more than this. So just so you know, when you hit the cue button, the song will play. Second I take my finger off the cue button, it will snap back to the point where I set the cue button. Okay, now this is really important because when this track is playing over here and it's playing out to the audience, I, in my ears or my headphones, will be cueing this track in over here and testing it and just generally like listening to what's going on. And to start getting the beat ready to line up with this one, I'll often tapping along to the beat of this track over here. Now, I'm going to be covering beat matching in a second, but it's really important that that cue button will snap back. Now, the second I hit play and pause, I've lost the cue button. Because watch, if I hit play and pause, and now I hit the cue button, it sets a new cue point, right? So you never really want to touch the play button until the track is kind of playing. So what you would do is you go back, set a cue point, tap along, and when you're ready, commit and hold down the cue button, and then you can hit play with your other finger, so your thumb, and then take your hand away and it'll continue playing. So if I hit this, then hit play, I can take my hand away. Okay, so that's essentially what the cue button does. More on that later on. Next most important thing is the platter here. So as we know, this will fast forward the song and rewind it. What you might not know is that there's 2 functionalities to this. When the song is playing, if I hit the top of the platter, it will stop. Think of it like an actual vinyl, okay? You know, like the old-fashioned vinyls that go around. If you touch the top, it stops. Like this. And then I can do a hard rewind or forward, which is obviously used to scratch. Worst scratch I've ever done in my life. Now, that's the one functionality of it. Now, the other functionality is you can touch just the sides. So if a song is playing and I touch just the sides, it won't stop. But what I can do is nudge it. Okay, so there's many times, and what I mean by nudge it is I can spin it forward and it will micro budge it forward or micro budge it back, almost like speeds it up or slows it down. So, and it's not really that audible, but if I do it to an extreme, you'll hear it speed up or slow down. Right, I did it to a bit of an extreme then. So, what is the, and by the way, if it's paused and I touch the slide, it will just do a hard fast forward or rewind. Okay, now, so what is the purpose of when it's playing touching the side? Well, one thing we're going to be doing in a bit is beat matching, where we get the two beats lined up, and sometimes you'll get them just slightly off, right? It's like diggun, 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 and you want them to be going perfectly together. So at that point, you would nudge it forward, okay? So that's the platter. The next most important thing is tempo. Remember we talked about BPM? You want to get the two BPMs exactly the same. Now I can put my finger here, and if you look at the screen, it will speed it up or slow it down. You can kind of see a visual representation there. And if you look at this number in this circle, it'll tell you what the BPM is, and you can go up or down. Now, this is sometimes really sensitive, and as you'll see on these DJ decks, it's not very long. On the CDJ 3000s, it's much wider. Now, you can change how sensitive this is. If you come here, you can click this button here, wide, and it'll go to 6, which is essentially, if I go all the way to the top or all the way to the bottom, it would be a 6% change, right? But if I hit this, it'll go to 10, which would be 10%, or 16, and I think it just goes to wide after that. Wide means you could literally put it to 0, right? It just won't move, or you can double it, I think, okay? Now, I would typically have it on 16. This is just where I have it. But if you find that that's too sensitive for you, you can obviously bump it down to 6. Yeah, I don't think I need to say much more on that. It can be used in many creative ways, but this is not the right part of the video for that. The next most important part of the decks is the looping feature. So as we know, the music is set to a grid, and music is often repetitive. Even if you were to go back to like Beatles songs, there's usually 4 chords that just loop and loop and loop. So looping is a massive part of music anyway. But as a DJ, one of the best things about looping is it's going to just buy you time. So for example, let's say we were at the end of the track here, and we could see the track is slowly but surely coming to the end. And we're like, oh my gosh, we're going to run out of time here. We can put a loop on. So you've got these in and out here. Essentially all you do is you hit in where you want the loop to start and out where you want the loop to finish. Okay, so I'll just show you. And remember what I said about the grid at the beginning. A bar is indicated with these red dots. So you know that's a bar. So we really want to be looping from a beginning to a bar to an end of a bar. So we'll do this. Right? In, out. And that loop is set. It'll just loop infinitely, and it buys us a load of time now. If we want to get out of the loop, we can hit exit. And we can also half the loop using these buttons here. So I can hit back and it'll half it. Or I can extend the loop if I want to, and it'll double it. So these kind of half or double it here, okay? That's just really interesting. And again, that can be used for creative effect, which we'll come on to later on. Okay, so that's looping. The next thing I want to talk about is hot cues. Okay, so this is really important as well. So let's just exit that. And I'm going to click on this waveform and come right to the beginning. Okay. Now, as you know, we've got the cue button here, which is kind of like a temporary cue button. But we can set permanent cue buttons, and they're called hot cues. So you've got these effects here. It'll be the same on all DJ decks. You just got to select hot cues, and it brings up these hot cues here. Now, you can essentially set a hot cue by going to any point and setting it in the same way you would a cue button, and you can remove them by hitting shift and this button here. So say for example we said, well, we want a permanent cue point to be at the beginning of the track. And when I say permanent, I mean I can set this hot cue, load a different track in, and load that track in later on, and that cue point will still be there, which is why these are so relevant. And you can set 8 of these, okay? So I might say, well, I want the first one to be at the beginning. Oh, by the way, there's something really important I didn't mention about looping. I knew I'd missed something. With looping, sorry to jump back, but I'm not re-recording this. With the in and the out button, you want to make sure there's something called quantize turned on. Quantize essentially is the computer's way of saying he hit that in button close to this beat. And so we're going to assume he wants it to be exactly on the beat. And it went same thing with the out. It will snap it to the grid. You now begin to see why the grid is really important as well, right? You see, like, and by the way, you can turn quantize on and off. You come to the screen, it's this cue button. If I turn it off and now I set an in and an out point, it will just set it exactly the millisecond I hit it, which will be wrong. Here it's just slightly out there, so you never want to risk that. You always, pretty much always want to have quantize on. And now it will snap it to the grid. That's really, really important. Which also brings me back to the hot cues, right? So let's just jump back again. If I come here and I put this here, with quantize on, it'll assume that I want it right at the beginning of this. So I can hit that, and now it'll play from that point. And it'll act exactly like the cue button, but just permanently there. So then maybe I said, well, I want to come to the breakdown of the song, and I'm going to be covering that later on. But say I came to here, and I was like, right, I want to set one at this point here. I can come and set one here. You see, this is really cool. And later on in the program, what is this, BBC? Later on, I'm going to be showing you exactly where to set your hot cues like a pro. So stay tuned. Oh, I'm such a dork. Right, so there's that. We've done this. Okay, so that's the main thing. Now, there's... do you know what? I'll cover two other things as well here. Beat jump. Beat jump is actually really important. Now, the reason it's important, I'm going to be coming on to this later on, but all tracks are written with certain time frames, okay? So we've obviously done beats and bars, but all tracks are written in phrases. Phrase is a section of the song, and a phrase would be like the intro, or the outro, or the drop, or the build, right? All these sections of the song we know, and I'm going to be covering this more later on. But beat jump is really relevant because it will jump forward a certain number of beats. I wish it was bars, because when there's 4 beats to a bar, and you'll see this now, because I've got beat jump loaded, you'll see there's 4 here. And that's just 1 bar. So as soon as you start going to 32, maths gets involved. I know 32 beats is 8 bars. You basically got to divide 32 by 4. See why it's annoying? It'd be better for it to just be bars. No one cares about beats. So if I came right to the beginning of the track here and did this, and I had this on 32. So this 4 and 8, so will relate to these buttons here, and this 8 here will relate to these buttons, and blah, blah, blah. So if this is 32, this will jump forward 8 bars. Notice how, on that waveform there, it jumped perfectly to that section. And I can jump forward to the next section. And all tracks are written in 8 bars or 16 bars. Going to come back to that later on. But this is great because when it comes to setting hot cues, I could jump forward and set one there. I could jump forward again, to, the next section here. And I could set a hot cue and go back to hot cues and set another hot cue here, which should be the beginning of the drop. Like this. So it's really relevant, beat jump. And then you've got pad effects here. Not all DJ decks have this, but these are kind of automatic effects you can just bring in. So, for example, at the top here, we can see there's echo, echo, and spiral. So, oh, here they are. Echo, echo, backspin, vinyl break. And this is just something that's kind of unique to Rekordbox. So, for example, if you can see backspin, I could play the song and then hit this, and it'll create a backspin effect. Which might be quite useful if you wanted to do a kind of cheeky transition from one to the other. So they're just kind of effects that are built in. Anyway, that's more unique to these DJ decks than this, so I'm going to stray away from that for now. So, the next thing we have, you will always have a universal knob up here, which you can twist, so you can go through and select different songs, okay? So if I came down to this track here, I can then hit load, and it'll load it onto that deck. Like this. Okay, and same thing on that side. So that's loading stuff in. We've got the mic level, okay, so it's obvious, it's just the level of the mic. We've got the mix here, which is when you've got your headphones plugged in, it's when you're listening to your headphones, it will be how much of the song that's playing out to the audience you can hear, and how much of the song that you've cued in, and I haven't come to the cue button yet, but it's the song that you can hear when your volume tempo is down, and the mix from one to the other. So if I turn it all the way up, all I'd hear is what the audience are hearing. If I turn it all the way to the other side, to the cue is what I'd hear on my headphones. And we haven't covered headphones and stuff yet, so don't worry, I'm coming on to that. And then this is just the volume level of the headphones you've got plugged in. And this is a smart fader, which is unique to these DJ decks. I'm not going to go into too much detail about it, but it essentially will sync two decks together. I'm coming on to the sync button later, so I'm going to leave that. So let's actually jump into the Q button, right? Because there's 3 Q buttons you're going to see on these DJ decks. And you're probably wondering, well, what the heck is the difference between all of them? This Q button I've already explained. These Q buttons here, once you've selected it, you will now hear whatever's playing on that track out of your headphones. Remember a second ago we just talked, if I turn it all the way to Q, I would hear just what's being cued. Now the beauty of this is I can turn the volume down and I can come and play around with this song over here and I will hear in my headphones what I'm doing, but the audience won't. So now this makes more sense, right? Master and Q. So I can turn that off if I want to. This is really important. And then we've got Q over here, which is just the master. So this is just master level, how loud the volumes coming out of the speaker is, right? But if I hit that Q on, it means in my headphones, I will hear just everything that's going on, okay? Or, yeah, that's right. Okay, then we've got this section here. So these are obviously volume, right? So it's like full volume, no volume, okay? This is a crossfader. Now what essentially this is you can move it from one side to the other and it will fade. It's essentially doing this. Okay? Now, there's a huge debate about this, about whether you should mix using the crossfader. I'm telling you straight up, don't do it. Okay? And the reason is, which we're going to come on to later in the video, the reason is because when you're doing a mix, oh my God, what do I tell you what? Concentrate, Phil. When you're doing a mix and you've got one track here and you're bringing up this other track, which we're going to cover, I will typically get to about this volume, and even, I'm going to be honest with you, 100% of the time when I'm mixing from one track to the other, there is a bit of time where both are at full volume and I'm using these to bring volumes down, which I'm going to come on to in a second. So there will be a point where I'm mixing 2 tracks and they're both at full volume, essentially, before I bring the other one down. With the crossfader, it's impossible to do that because you're only ever going to be kind of doing this. So crossfader really, in my experience, is used for doing scratching. Worst scratch ever. But essentially what it does is I can use it to cut in a bit of this. Like that, okay? But I'm not covering scratching in this video because no one scratches live. I mean, they do, but I don't know. My opinion on scratching is it's kind of cool if you know how to do it, but, you know, I've never listened to a song and gone, wow, that scratch really enhanced that song. Sorry, I know I probably just insulted a load of scratch DJs out there, but I never use crossfader, bottom line. Okay, so these are the volumes. Now, you're also going to see at the top, trim, right? Which is also volume. And you're going to think to yourself, well, like, you know, and by the way, there's this whole thing about like volume and gain. It's basically how loud it is, right? That's all you really need to know. Volume and gain are basically the same thing. I know that's going to cause a load of hate comments in the thing, but it doesn't matter. Well, this is a basics video, right? So trim is how loud it is. Now, you might say, well, why is there trim here and volume here? Well, because when you're DJing, you really want to be able to utilize these. Like, I might want to slam that into full volume, right? And I just need to know as a performance, I can go right to the top there, and bang, we're in, okay? Trim will set how loud the top volume will be. Bottom line here, guys, set it to the 12 o'clock, leave it there. Honestly, the only time I'd ever really move it from this position is if it was clipping, if it was going into the red. So when you play on a song, there's a little graph that jumps up and down here, and all you need to make sure is the red isn't showing too much. So that's good. If I turn the trim up, we're now clipping, right? So if that was happening, you just turn it down a little bit. That's basically it. The other thing I will tell you, just as a little anecdote, is quite often you're in a club or you're playing, like, you know, I've played a couple of places where they're like, don't move the master level any louder than that, because all DJs just, as a DJ, you know, the louder it is, the more people are screaming, basically. So all DJs secretly want it to be loud. And so they'll say, right, you can't move past that point, but you could secretly move the trim knobs up a little bit. But you shouldn't be clipping. And clipping is, like, in a nutshell, waveforms go like this, you know, like if you were to look at a waveform, it looks like this. If you turn it up too loud, the speakers are vibrating back and forth in the same way the waveforms are going up and down. That's how it kind of pushes the sound out there. There's only so loud a speaker can go. Like, it can't go out, you know, like I can't turn it up so loud, it's like whoa, whoa, whoa. It just can't. So it gets to a point where it just can't physically move back and forth anymore. And so it literally snips the waveform off, right, which is called clipping. It's not necessarily the speaker that's doing that. There's things built into the technology now that will digitally clip it. But essentially, when you snip the top of the waveforms off, it clips it and it introduces distortion. So, and you might say, well, I like distortion. Well, maybe you do, but you shouldn't really be clipping. So there's that. Keep it at the 12 o'clock position. Then the next most important thing is cutoff. This is a very well-known sound in the world of DJing. Cutoff will essentially take away, I'll tell you what, I'll come on to cutoff in a second because it'll make more sense if I explain these. These three knobs here, high, mids and lows. This is relatively obvious. These are all volume. Everything here is volume. There's no effects going on here. That's really important. I didn't realize that when I started DJing. You think stuff is going on here that's, you know, like additional effects. It's not. It's just volume. So if I turn that down, I'm turning down the highs. Just takes the highs out, and you just think of the highs, the high notes, like tick, 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 tick. And the thing that you're controlling with the highs is the percussive sounds and white noise. So tick, 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 tick. Look, and you know what sounds they are, because if I cut the other two, the mids and highs, you hear them. So you're controlling the highs with that. The mids is vocals and instruments like saxophones, pianos, obviously vocals, right? If you take that away, it will reduce the volume of those areas. But it's really just the mid frequencies, the frequencies in the middle. Like, you got to think the lows are down here, the mids here, the highs are up here. You're just turning down the volume of the mids. So you've got the highs, you've got the lows, but you've got nothing in the middle. And obviously that's just a drum loop. And then lows is the kick and the bass. So it's the sub-frequencies. It's the low frequencies. So the boom, boom, boom. It's the sounds you'd hear if you were standing outside a club, right? So you turn down the kick and the bass. Now, general rule here, don't boost them. Some DJs will say you can boost them. Sometimes I've made a track and I'm playing it in the club and I'm like, oh, it's lacking high end, and I'll just give it a bit of a boost. But the reality is, the track has been made exactly how the artist wanted it to be heard. If they wanted the highs to be louder, they'd have made it louder. It's not down to you to dictate which frequencies need to be boosted. You're using these really to mix from one track from another and make sure there's no clashing frequencies on either side. I'm coming on to that in more detail later on, okay? And then we come to the cutoff. The cutoff is essentially doing this. If I turn it to the left, it turns down the highs and the mids, leaving just the lows. Have a listen. If I turn it up, it does the opposite. It turns down the lows and the mids and leaves just the highs. So listen. Which is the same as doing this. Now, you will hear this kind of sound with the cutoff. And this is called resonance. And in all honesty, you really don't need to know about it, but if you kind of picture this literally sweeping down, so you've got the highs bouncing here, the mids here, the lows here, and it sweeps down. Well, it doesn't just kind of turn down the volume, it also creates this slight peak at the point it's turning it down, which creates this kind of sound. It's really complicated. You really don't need to know about it at all. Now, you can change the resonance as well by using this thing here called param. If I turn this down, it'll get rid of that kind of sound. Listen. But if I wanted to, I could turn it up by turning this up, and you'd have more of that kind of sound. I'm going to turn it really high so you can really hear it. You hear that? Just set it at 12 o'clock, guys. Honestly, don't overthink that one. And so that's that. And then finally, we come over to this little section here, which is the effects. Okay, so essentially you've got the master level, Q, we've covered this. This is which deck is being affected by the effects. Deck number 1, deck number 2, or 1 and 2. So you can switch them across. You can select the effects and do it this way, but honestly, no one does it like that because it's clunky. You just come over here, click this button, and then you go and select whatever you wanted. For example, delay. right? And then I'm going to come back to this section in a second. This turns the effect on and off, and this is how much of the effect is being used. If it's at minimum and I turn it on, nothing changes. Let me just go to beat jump and go back to the beginning of the track. Okay, so watch. If I turn this on, at minimum, nothing happens. But as I introduce this depth, now we're going to hear it. Like this. And the way you have to think about it is, this will introduce the effect. At this point, there's equal amount of the effect being introduced to the sound that's playing. If I go past this point, there's now more effect than there is original sound. So if you go all the way up to 100%, it's just 100% effect, right? And I guess the best way to describe this as well is if I went to reverb and I put it all the way to the top, it just completely washes that sound. It's just 100% reverb. That is the sound that you're adding in, if that makes sense. So now the beat is interesting. This is like the beat of the effect. Okay, so say there's a delay and the beat was like this, and I put a delay on and I went the delay is happening to the beat of the grid. Again, the reason why it's important having a grid. If I made that shorter to half, it would happen double. So it would go See how that works? It's like, it's how quickly the effect is happening. Now, it doesn't really work with reverb, because reverb is just a washout. But if I went to delay, you'll hear it. See, it's changing the space. So I'm not going to explain that in any more detail. Hopefully that makes sense. So there we go, guys. That is the basics of the DJ decks. I'm pretty sure I covered everything. Let's move on to the next section. There's one other thing I wanted to mention really quickly. There's something called sampler. You can select it. You can drag individual samples onto these sounds. So, you know, like James Hype has got James Hype bitch. You could load that in and go James Hype bitch. But in all honesty, I don't know anyone who uses the sampler. I'm not going to spend much time on that at all. I don't use it. You could put like an air horn, but just don't bother. It's cringy. And I'll tell you something else. James Hype doesn't use the sampler. James Hype has a whole deck where he has James Hype bitch just loaded in, and he uses the Q button. Don't use the sampler. I'm just going to say that. Just going to say it. In my opinion, don't use it. All right, let's move on to the next section. I'm sure there's going to be a load of DJs that disagree with me there, but it's just my opinion. Okay, so I want to do a quick section on hot cues versus the Q button versus memory points. So essentially, these are all three different ways to set markers in the song, okay? So we've obviously done the Q button. I'm not going to repeat myself. That's just a temporary set point that you can use whenever you want. Hot cues are basically cue points, but you can set multiple of them throughout a track, and they function in the exact same way, but they stay there permanently. Then we've got memory points. Now, memory points are specific to record box and CDJs. I actually find myself using these quite a lot. So I will regularly kind of already know if I'm doing a DJ set at what point I'm bringing a track in. So you can actually see here on this waveform, right? I could come to a certain point and I could drag this along and I can set a cue point. And you'll see this little like orange button appear here. So I know that's exactly where the cue point is. Now, I could come to hot cues and I could set multiple cue points like this, right? And you can see A, B, and I can see these different cue points. And you could come in and you can set them using this as well, but I always use the controller to do it. And so we can see them. And then you've got these little red arrows, which are memory points, okay? Now, the thing with memory points is there's no way to snap. It's not a playable thing, a memory point. A memory point is just for you to get to that part of the song quickly. So, as you can see, I've set one right at the beginning of the track. And if I want to get from where I am in the track to that point, I can hit back, and it'll take me back to the next memory point that I've set. So if I hit it, because where I am here, which is at B, if I hit back, it'll take me to this red one here. Bang. And I'm at the beginning of the song. Or maybe I've already set a marker here saying, well, this memory point here is where I'm going to start mixing in the next song. But I could jump to that point here. Boom. Like that. And we've jumped to the end. When I started DJing, I was like, what's the point though? I'll just use hot cues for that, which you absolutely can. But I just find myself using them now. They're just good. They're good because if I want to jump to a hot cue to like B here, I got to hit this, which will actually play it for a split second. Which is like, ugh, I don't like that. I want it to be clean. I want to jump to that point so I can just go boom like this or boom like this. So I typically use memory points for the moment I know I'm going to bring it in and the moment I'm mixing out the next song, which is typically the intro and the beginning of the outro, which I don't really need them for at this point, but it's just a little safety thing. You know, just here's a little point for you, okay? Really, with DJing, you want to just make it easy for yourself. Performing live is kind of stressful, right? Because it's all on you. You're standing there, you've got to know it. And yeah, okay, I can look at this waveform here and I can eyeball different parts of the song and know roughly, and I can hear phrases and stuff. But how nice is it that I just set myself a little point? So I'm like, oh, that's the exact point that I need to bring in. So say there's someone in the booth speaking to me or whatever, something else is going on, and I look down and I've had a lapse in concentration, I can just go, oh, it's coming up now. You know, and the cool thing is, like, you can see these points. So if I hit play here, I can see that point coming along. So it's like, I know the exact moment. So there we go. That's cue button, hot cues, and memory points. You can use hot cues for everything. I did for the first couple of years. I've just started using memory points now because I just find them cleaner and nice. And I actually don't use many hot cues. The reason I don't use hot cues on the CDJs is because on these decks, and I think there is a way to change this now, but I haven't figured it out yet. But on these decks, I can hit this and it'll play until I hit my finger off. And it's called trigger mode. Like this. On the CDJs, it doesn't work like that. Once you hit the hot cue, it just plays. It jumps to that point and plays, which I always found kind of irritating. I know you can change it now, but I haven't figured it out yet. So I just found myself using it less. So on the CDJs, I find myself using memory points and the cue button. Right? And I think most DJs who DJ on the CDJs do that as well. That's why these DJ decks are actually in many ways easier to use. So there's that. Let's move on to the next section. Sorry, quick note. I just realized I got some information wrong there. You know when I said you hit it and it plays and snaps back? That's actually called gate mode. And then the CDJ 3000s where you hit it and it plays, that's called trigger mode. Not that it matters at all. I just know there's going to be some people, you know, he got that wrong. Well, I didn't get it wrong, okay? Okay guys, so it's got to the point in the video I want to teach you the most important thing, which is song structure and understanding it. Now I'm going to try really hard not to go down a rabbit hole, so I'm going to stick to this being just house music. Because house music is quite easy to kind of explain here, and it can begin to sound, some of these rules can potentially change with other music. Again, I'm already overcomplicating it. 99% of the time the stuff I'm about to teach is going to apply. So a beat is usually the kick drum. If you think of the kick, like dum, 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 that's a beat, obviously. And so you get 4 beats in a bar, okay? And you can see it, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the way you would count as a DJ is you go 1, 2, 3, 4, new bar, 2, 2, 3, 4, new bar, 3, 2, 3, 4. So this is important because some of the stuff I'm teaching you now is going to, I think it'll actually blow your mind, okay? Then we go on to the next bit, which is phrases. A phrase is usually something changes in dance music every 8 or 16 bars. If you don't believe me, pause this video, go to one of your favorite dance tracks, press play, and count 8 or 16 bars, and notice how something changes. A new instrument will be brought in. Maybe the drums will be taken away. Maybe the builds will start. Maybe the drop will land. And just keep going. 8 bars, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, and just sit there and it will blow your mind, okay? And it's really cool. And the whole reason behind this is because the DJs, the producers who are making this music, need to make the music DJ friendly. So everything is done to a very strict kind of set of rules, really. And sometimes it won't be 16, it'll be 32, but it'll always be to that structure, 8, 16, 32. So that's really cool. That's probably blown your mind if you didn't know that. You should go and test it straight away. Now, with dance music, the structure is always this. Intro drums, breakdown, build, drop, second breakdown, build, drop, outro. Just to kind of dive into this slightly, intro is just the intro drums. The breakdown is usually where everything kind of breaks down. It kind of goes quiet. Maybe the singing comes in at this point. It's the kind of quiet bit. Then the build is usually when everything gets a bit repetitive. I'm like, build, repetitive, riser noises. You know what this is. I'm preaching to the freaking choir here. And then the drop. The drop is the bit where the drums, the bass line, all that stuff comes in. It's the bit where everyone jumps up and down. Obviously, I don't want to insult your intelligence. Then we go into the second breakdown, which is similar to the first breakdown. The second build, which is similar to the first build. The drop, which is often very similar. And then the outro drums, which is similar to the intro drums. These are the different phrases of a dance song. Now, what I've got here is song A and song B. And I'm just going to show you the most common places that you would mix one track to the next. Now, each of these sections is typically 16 bars, okay? And 8 is usually halfway through, but something will always change halfway through, but it's typically 16 bars. So each of these lines from this point on represents 16 bars in a track. Now, the most common place to do a mix is the outro drums and the intro drums. And if you line these up at exactly the same point, so you hit play, obviously the track has to be going at the same speed. And if it is, if you line the 16 bars of the outro drum of track A, the track that's playing, and the 16 bars of the outro drums of the intro drums of track B, the two will blend perfectly from one through to the next. And it's made this way. You'll notice now when you listen to outro drums, instruments start to be taken away. You know, the bass line will go, the percussion will be taken away. Same thing with intro. It's the opposite. Instruments start to get added. And I'll show you this in a second, but if you just hit play at the outro and intro at exactly the same time, you don't actually have to do anything, and the two tracks will kind of blend themselves from one to the next. But I'm going to come on to that in a bit. So that's intro. Then the second most common, so that's the most common place to mix. The second most common place to mix is the drop. So what you can do is, as I said, the second build, drop, outro is very similar to the first half. So a lot of DJs will just play the first big breakdown, build, drop, and go on to another song, especially with like big EDM festival type tracks. So what you can do is you can put the intro of track B bring it in at the exact moment the drop of track A starts. And then what happens is towards the end of the drop, you do your blend and you remove the stuff. And then this, instead of it going into the second breakdown of track A, it goes into the first breakdown of track B. And therefore, you skip the whole second half of the song. So that's the second most popular place to do a transition. And then the third most common place is what I would call a drop swap. So what you would do is you set your cue point at the beginning of the build of track B. And as track A hits its build, you bring in the build of track B and you do your blend there. So when people are all expecting one drop that they already know, you're busy blending from one track to another track, and at the last moment you swap out the drops. So people suddenly start dancing to a different drop even though they're expecting a different one. So that's the third most common place. And you've also done a transition, right? And that's pretty much it. Honestly, I don't want to overcomplicate it any more than this, but it's just as simple as that. 16 bars, something new happens in a track, all dance music follows the same rules, and we can use this as DJs to perfectly blend different parts of the track. And actually, one last thing I want to show you. Let's go back to beat jump now, and it'll make a lot more sense. So let's say I came right to the beginning of this track here. Now, you can eyeball, as a DJ, these different sections. So I look at this as a DJ, and I can go, well, this is the intro here. This is probably the build, because I can see this thick area here is where the track gets louder. So I know that this first thick part here is going to be the drop. So then I can kind of see, well, this is probably the breakdown. Maybe around here is the breakdown and the build. Then this will be the second breakdown, the second build, the second drop, and then the outro drums will be around here. Now check it out. I'm going to come to beat jump, 32 bars, which is 32 beats, which is 8 bars. And watch, as I hit this one button here, it's going to jump to very relevant points in the track. So I hit it once, halfway through the intro. Hit it again, takes me perfectly to the breakdown or build. Hit it again, takes me to the beginning of the drop. Hit it again, takes me halfway through the drop. End of the drop here. Hit it again, takes me to the second build. Hit it again, and it takes me to the beginning. See, it's landing at exactly these points. So you can kind of see how relevant this is and how we're going to use beat jump in a moment to help us set really relevant hot cues. Okay, let me show you how to set your hot cues like a pro. Okay, so just so you know, as I've already mentioned, I typically don't use hot cues. I actually use memory points and two memory points where I bring the track in and where I'm going to start fading out, where I'm going to bring the next track in over it. So it's usually the intro and the outro, and I just have them there. But for the longest time, I did use hot cues, and I actually recommend you do, especially as a beginner. Now, this is the way most beginners go wrong with hot cues. They just set them randomly, like, oh, I'll set one there, and I'll set one there, and, before you know it, they've got all different tracks, there's no rhyme or reason to any of them, and it doesn't really help them at all. So here's the big secret. You set the cue points at exactly the same point of every single track. So whenever you load in a track, you'll know instantly which button will get you to what point of the song, which is going to be really useful for you for knowing what will line up with what on different tracks. So this is really important. So first things first. This is what I would recommend, but obviously you can set your own hot cues at random points, but as long as they're all the same, it should be the same kind of thing. But I would recommend this. So you've got 8. These are the ones I'd recommend. The first would be on the first beat of the track. The next will be 8 bars into the intro. This is where beat jump's going to come in handy. Go to beat jump, make sure it says 32 in this corner here, and we're going to jump forward 8 bars, and I'm going to go back to hot cues and set the second one there. Now I'm going to do the outro. Okay, so I'm going to go to beat jump, and I'm going to jump all the way along to the second drop, and then we've got the outro drums here. So, and I'm kind of eyeballing it, but if you follow along with the song structure, the build, the drop, and you just follow along with the whole 8-bar sequence, we know that this is the beginning of the outro. So I can come back to hot cues, beginning of outro, and then you've guessed it, 8 bars into the outro. Now this is really, really important because we know that if I hit that intro button there, at the exact same time as hitting this button, the beginning of the outro on another song, at exactly the same point, and press play, as long as they were lined up, they would just line up perfectly. So you might say, well, why have we set 8 bars in here and 8 bars in here? Well, it's just a fail-safe. What if you're in the club and you get distracted and you've missed it? Well, don't worry. We now know that this button here is going to be 8 bars until we get to the breakdown. And this second button here will be 8 bars to the end of the song. So it'd be the same thing. I know I could hit this button here at the same time as this button here, or as long as this button aligned with this button here, and I'd have exactly the same overlap on both. Hopefully this makes sense. Now you might be wondering what we're going to do with these two. Well, this is really just the build and drop. Okay, so this would be the first build and drop, and this would be the second build and drop. So the best thing to do is go and set the drop first. So we're going to go back to beat jump, and we're going to go all the way to the beginning of the track here. And I know from eyeballing it, like I said, there's the build, there's the drop. Come back to hot cue and set the drop. And I know if I hit this now, I'll play the drop. There. And now I can go 8 bars back from that to set the build. Beat jump, 8 bars back to hot cues, set the build. So now we've got intro halfway through the intro, build, drop. And then we're going to do second build and drop. So I'm going to go back to beat jump. We're going to go all the way forward until we get to the drop, which is this point here. Hot cue, there. Beat jump, back. 8 bars, hot cue, there. And so that will be the same on every single track. So I now can look at the screen as a visual representation and see, well, there's the intro, there's the build, there's the drop, there's the second build and drop, and there's the outro drums. So hopefully you're beginning to see how cool this is. So we now got these marked on every single track. We now know, well, if I was to hit the intro of this track at the exact point of the outro of this track, they'd line up perfectly. And you can literally see them coming along. So say this is the beginning of the outro, this button here, which is G. If I was to come back a little bit here, you can see G coming along. So at that exact moment, I could hit the intro of another track and it'd be 16 bars. Let's say we missed it. Well, don't worry, we can just go to H, and as H is coming along here, just as it passes H, I'm going to hit the second marker here. So I know I've now only got 8 bars to do a mix rather than 16 bars. Let's say I wanted to do a drop swap. Well, we know that C here is the beginning of the build. So as that comes along, if I was to come to the second track and hit the beginning of the build here, it will line up perfectly and I can do my blend and I can do a drop swap. See how genius that is? It's so cool, and if you were to structure it like this, it would massively help you out. hopefully that all makes sense, and let's move on to the next part of the video. Okay guys, now we're going to cover beat matching, which is the most fundamental type of transition from one track to another. You might find it weird that we're this far into the video and I haven't actually taught you a transition yet, but I've taught you in a really specific way so you get a really, really solid understanding of music, how it works, when you would do these transitions, and now we're going to move on to actually doing beat matching, actually doing a transition. So, I have provided you with 2 tracks below this video. There's a link to a Dropbox folder with 2 beat tracks in it, okay? Now this is relevant because what we're going to be doing now is beat matching. Now we could beat match with real songs, but the problem with real songs is there's lots going on. You don't just have the kick drum, you have percussive sounds, you have vocals, you have chords, you've got so many more things going on that actually if I want to teach you how to just beat match easily, I want to just provide you with a beat track. So below are 2 tracks that you can download, okay? Just beat track 128 BPM, and it just sounds like this. It's literally just a beat. So we are going to get you beat matching in the next 2 minutes. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to create a playlist, drag these beats in. Now I've got 2 tracks, beat track 128 and then this mysterious other track called beat track 2, which is a different speed to beat track 1. But the funny thing is the second you drop it into Rekordbox, it just analyzes it and it tells you what the speed is anyway, which tells you how easy all this stuff really is after a while. So what we're going to do, we're going to drop beat track into track 1, just drag and drop it like this, get the other one and drag and drop it into the other one over here. Now we'll see that my tempo sliders here are off. So what I'm going to do now is just snap that back to the middle and you'll feel it kind of clunk into the middle like this. And now they're both 128. And so what we're going to do, both volume faders all the way up to full. We're going to come to one of the tracks, go to the beginning, set a cue point. Now if we hit this, we can tap along. So what we're going to do is on track A, we're going to hit play and we're going to tap along. It's the first thing I'm going to get you to do. Okay, that's it. Now, that's obviously incredibly easy. So the next thing I'm going to get you to do is I'm going to get you to tap along, and when you feel like you're tapping along perfectly, we're going to hold down the cue button and hit play. So we hold it down and hit play with our thumbs. Now, there's another thing I'm going to get you to do. We want to make sure we do this on a bar, okay? We already know where that is. It's where that red line falls. So hit play here, tap along, and when you see that bar come along at the exact moment, hit cue and hit play. Great, the 2 beats were slightly out. I hope that happens for you too. In fact, I kind of slightly did that purposely because I want to show you how we're gonna use that nudge feature. You remember I told you at the beginning, 17 hours ago, about how you could nudge it forward and back? We're gonna do it. Now, if you're anything like me, you probably get a bit confused as to which way is which, right? So just kind of keep your eye on the screen and nudge it, and if it's going further away, go the opposite way. You're just touching the outside of the deck. So I'm just going to hit play at the same time and nudge one of them in. Boom! You just did your first beat match. And it really is as simple as that. You tap along with the cue, hold it down, hit play, and bam, you've done it. That's actually kind of it. That's kind of it, really. I mean, honestly, if you just rewatch this little section and go and do it again, you're going to get it. Now, of course, let's talk briefly about mixing 2 tracks at a different speed. So drag beat track 2 into the lane and you'll see it come in at 131. So what do? We could either bring this track up to 131 or we move that down to 128 to the same speed. It literally is as simple as this. So we just go all the way down to 128 like this. Let's get it perfect like that. And now we'll do the same thing. So we can bring the volume down from all the way to the beginning of the track if we want, like this. Hit a cue button, hit play, and we'll do the same thing. And there you go. Okay, so that's it. Now, if you wanted to start practicing like bringing in at a specific point. You could potentially, if you wanted to, come right to the beginning of the track here, get beat jump, go forward 8 bars, come here like this, set a hot cue like, set a hot cue like this. And now we're going to say we are going to bring it in at that exact hot cue. Now, you already know about phrases and stuff like this, so you can now go and apply this to real life. But, you know, if you want to put that additional pressure on yourself, you could just say, well, we're going to bring in this track at the, we're going to bring in the beginning of this track here, hot cue point, at the exact moment A passes. Because this is what you're going to be doing when you're DJing with actual songs. There we go. Okay, so there you go. In about 30 seconds flat, I taught you how to do your first beat match. How cool is that? So what we're going to do now is bring in some headphones. Okay, so we're now going to introduce headphones. Obviously, we're aware as DJs that we're going to be playing one song out to the audience, and we're going to be doing stuff and queuing up and listening to other songs privately to ourselves. As we know, we'll do that by turning the volume down and hitting the cue button here. I'm just going to do a quick sub note here on what I would actually take to the club with me. I think you'd find this interesting. So I take this little pouch here. These are my headphones I use. They're the Shure SE, oh god, here we go, SE846. I'm going to spare you the time of going and searching these. These are $1,000 headphones, which is extreme. I'm just going to explain this to you, why I use these in a second. But I'll just show you what I take to the club with me. I always take 2 USBs with exactly the same thing loaded on both. And one thing you'll find interesting is I always go to the club with somebody. Don't want to look like a loner. You know, you want to walk in with somebody, you want to look cool. I will always give the second USB to somebody the minute I see them that day. I'll go, right, just put that in your pocket, right? Because there's no point in taking 2 USBs and then you go and lose this, you know, and then you've got no music at all. So I'll put one of these in my pocket and I'll put the other one in my friend's pocket. Obviously, he'll put it in his pocket. I won't put it in his pocket. And therefore, I'm just covered. Now, I've spoken to a lot of DJs who say they actually do 3 USBs, and I don't. So that's that. I also take along these little things here. These are ACS in-ear earplugs. Okay, so these have been molded to my ear. I actually went along to have this mold put in my ear, and the woman looked in my ear and she went, yeah, we won't be doing that today. And I was like, why? And she said, because your ears, she said, there's a scale of like how blocked your ears are. She said, your ears are 100% blocked. She was like, I can't even see your eardrum. I was practically deaf. So I had to go and put, you don't need to know, I had my ears syringed. Then I went back, had this stuff done. Another little funny thing for you. When they're doing it, they basically put a bit of like foam really far down your ear with like a string. It's like a mini tampon for your ear. They put it all the way down and then they squirt this stuff into your ear and it molds to your ear, right? I don't know why I'm telling you this, but it's just funny. And the woman was like, oh, you'll cough when I put this down. She said, when it touches up against your eardrum, you just cough. And I was like, what are you on about? I'm not going to cough. She stuck it down, and all of a sudden you start coughing. It's really weird. Anyway, so you do that, then you get these things arrive in the post a couple of weeks later. And what's great about these is they don't muffle the sound. It's literally like you buy these and it brings them down 12 decibels. And it's great. I'm going to tell you something really sad now. When I go and see other DJs play, I'll often wear these. Because I'm a DJ and I'm so precious about my hearing, I hate my ears ringing. Remember when you used to go clubbing and you'd go out and you'd come home and your ears, you'd be lying in bed with your ears ringing? I hate that now. So if I go and see like deadmau5 or any DJ really, last time I wore these is when I went to see deadmau5, and literally the windows were vibrating and I knew I was there enjoying the music just as much as everybody else. And I left and I just took these out and I was like, no ringing in my ears. It was freaking awesome. And also, if you're going to be playing in clubs a lot, you know, people go out clubbing once every 2 weeks. You could be in a club every night of the week if you were successful. You've got to protect your hearing. So I've banged on about that long enough now. Now, let me tell you about these headphones as well. These are pretty cool, right? They've got these little squidgy ends. So you squidge them down just like you would if you were to use those regular, you know, the cheap, crappy headphones. And then you stick them in your ear. and then it expands in your ear, okay? And what's good about this is it's essentially wearing earplugs, but the music is delivered straight to your eardrum, which is really good. Now, you might say, do we have to spend all that money? No, you don't. Shure even have other headphones that are cheaper than this. The reason I got them is because I travel quite a lot, and I actually use these to produce music. So you have to be able to have good headphones that have really good frequency response when you're producing music, because you want to hear the full sound. You know, like if I played a track from my laptop now, you're not hearing all the frequencies, right? I'm actually going deaf because it's filling up in my ear. But yeah, these are really high quality headphones. So I don't just use them to DJ, I use them to produce music, and I wanted incredibly high quality headphones, which is exactly what these are. So that's why I've got expensive ones, just to explain that to you, okay? So plug these in. Now, the beauty of this is I can turn the volume all the way down, put Q on, and you can't hear it, but I can hear it in my ear at this point, okay? So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to have the volume all the way down, okay, on one. We're going to press play on one track, doesn't matter which one you do. Have the volume on down on the one we're going to bring in. We're going to beat match. We're going to line up the beats. And then when we've got them good, we're just going to slowly bring this up and take this one away. That's the next exercise. So in fact, I don't even need to show you, because you just be watching me doing exactly what I told you to do. So go ahead and do that. Now, the next thing we're going to do. Oh, no, I'll do it for you quickly. Come on, let's do it. Let's get serious here, Phil. So this track's playing. Turn Q off before you bring it up so you can hear what everyone else is hearing. And if you got it right, no one would know that you just swapped from one track to another, which is the basics of DJing, really. So we've done that. I think that's pretty much it. Honestly, it doesn't really get much more complicated than that. Well, it does. It does, because I'm going to show you frequencies and blending from one track to another. In fact, I could show you that with these tracks, and then we'll move on to real life. So here's what you need to do. All you need to remember, and this is what I do 99% of the time when I'm beat matching, is you don't want to have bass lines and kick drums sitting on top of each other, okay? So this is a little introduction to these frequencies here, okay? So we know that the lows will control the bass line and the kick drum. So the track that I'm bringing in, I'll just cut the bass and the lows. So as we bring this in, what we're actually hearing from this track is the top end of the kick and percussive sounds. And I'll put it in my headphones, cue it in, beat match it, and begin to bring it up. And as I begin to bring this track up, the percussive sounds of this track might start to clash with this track over here. So as I'm bringing it up, as I get to about 80, 90%, I then start removing frequencies from this track, because I don't want these clashing hi-hats. So I might begin to bring this up and just begin to take away some of the highs and mids here. And if you wanted a kind of hard and fast rule, I'd say bring it to 80%, then cut the highs to about the 11 o'clock position, or maybe even 10 o'clock position, cut the mids to about the 11 o'clock position and bring it all the way up. So now we'll hear primarily the percussive sounds from this track here, and we've cut them so they're not clashing too much with this track. On phrase, right, so every 8 bars, you know, halfway through the intro, or, you know, at a phrase point, you know, which is the hot cues we just set a second ago, I'll just swap the bass lines. That's what I do. Because often you'll have a bass line playing here and a bass line playing here, and you can't have them playing at the same time, so I just swap them. So you know we were doing hot cues a second ago, and we said, this is the intro, and this is halfway through the intro. And this is the outro, and this is halfway through the outro. Halfway through, I swap. And I'm going to give you a real-life demonstration of this, and maybe this is the wrong point in the video to explain it, but I feel like it's just a good process for you to follow. So halfway through, swap, okay? And then I continue, I swapped them the wrong way then. Swap, So I turn one off and one on. Now this track is now playing with all full volumes. And what I do now is I begin to take these away bit by bit while bringing the volume down. That's how I do it. Honestly, I'm pretty much going to say 100% of the time. Now, we can practice this. I'm just going to do this for you now from 0. Beat match it, turn it on, bring it up. But we're just doing it with a beat, and then obviously afterwards I'll do it with actual songs. So let's go ahead and do this. You see what I did there? Now, obviously, that was probably totally underwhelming for you. It was probably stupid for me to explain that to you, but I wanted you to see what I will be doing on an actual track, but just with the kick drum playing in the background. Right, now we've done that, let's go ahead and load in 2 real tracks, and we're going to do exactly this. So let me go ahead and do that. Okay, so we've loaded in 2 real tracks. They're both tracks I've created myself. One is called Rika. You can go and check it out on Spotify. And the other one is called Stay. At this current moment of filming this video, it has not been released yet. So if we were to put these both back to their default positions in terms of tempo, one's 125, one's 128. So let's bring Rika up to 128. Now, if you were playing live, you would bring it up gradually up to 128. You wouldn't just move it quickly. You've got to bear in mind, right? Unless you're a superstar DJ and everyone's come to stare at you, your job as a DJ is for people to not stare at you. You don't want to do something like, whoops, speed the song up really quickly, because the last thing you want as a DJ is people going, what the hell is the DJ doing? Like, that's the last thing. You don't want people looking at you. You want to be invisible, really. Unless you're like me and you're insecure and you want to stand on the stage. You want to have 20,000 people staring at you to try and, make you feel good about yourself. Anyway, let's not talk about my psychology. Let's do this. So we're going to move this up to 128 to start. Now, as you can see, this is quite fiddly. And honestly, if you get to 28.01, you're good. Don't worry about it. Don't stress out being there. I've been there in the club before. It's like you're trying to get it perfect. Don't worry about that. Remember, you can always nudge it back on if it starts to drift out, but it won't at 0.1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back a little bit on this track just there and set a cue point. So when I hit play, I will see it coming past this G here. Oh, hold on. We've got to get to G, which is here. So let me redo that. I'm going to come back and I'm just going to set a cue point here. So this is going to play 1 bar, and then it's going to go into the outro, or the beginning of the outro of Rika. As soon as G passes, this is the point where I'm going to be cueing in and beat matching the first beat of Stay over here, okay? And then I'm going to go ahead and do everything I just told you. So I'm going to cut the bass from Stay. Halfway through, I'm going to swap it, so 8 bars in, so you can see here at H and B. So H on this track, B on this track, I'm going to swap them. And I'm just going to do everything I just said. Like as I bring it up, I'm going to begin to take away the highs and mids, swap the bass. As soon as I bring it up to 80% here, begin to take away these frequencies here. Swap the bass, continue to take these away and take it away. And you're going to see this is going to sound pretty good. I just know it is. Okay, so let's go and have a go. And there you go. You just follow along, you just do exactly that. If you just follow that system I just did then, what I want to say to you is use your ears, make sure you're clearing space. But honestly, I would just follow that formula. You know, it works every single time. I could drag in a completely different track now and it would probably work again. So let me go and do that. Okay, I just brought in another track I made. This is a track called Vibrate. I made it with an awesome DJ called Esh, and this will hopefully be out soon as well. So what I'm going to do is come to the end of this track, and I can see this is just before the outro, G and H. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing. So I'm going to have this one playing. I'm going to cut the bass over here. I'm going to get this to the very first beat over here, and I'll do exactly the same thing again. So as we come up to G and this passes, I'm going to do the whole beat match. And they're both 128, so this should work perfectly. Straight into the breakdown. It's freaking awesome. By the way, one last thing I want to show you. Remember before I said you could pretty much just hit play and it would sound good because one track is bringing in instruments and one track's taking it away? Since this is going to be like a 7-hour video anyway, I'll just show you this, okay? So I'll do the exact same thing then, but I will do nothing. I'll just beat match it and bring the volume up. In fact, you know what? I won't even do that. I'll leave them at full volume. And we'll just listen and notice how it sounds pretty good, and I'm doing nothing at all. And this is the beauty of phrase matching. So let's do this. See how freaking cool that is? That's just beat matching and phrase matching. And I can tell you now, if I did that exact transition in a club, no one would think twice about it. So that's beat matching for you. Okay, I want to touch briefly on just developing the skill of beat matching by ear. It's not really that important, because you're going to be using visual representations like the grid all the time. But it might be a useful skill for you to just practice. So what you're going to do is go and drag the 128 BPM track into both, set the cue point on one, press play on the other, but what we're going to do is just not look at the screen. Try and get it on point, and then we're going to nudge it until we can it sounds like those two kick drums are sitting right on top of each other. Because we're playing with kick drums, sometimes when you start cueing it in, it might sound a bit confusing. So sometimes it's nice to tap just to the right-hand side and then just hit play. Because we're tapping along a kick drum while listening to a kick drum, you might actually start to confuse your brain as to which kick drum you're listening to. So it might be worth just tapping the side. I should probably have said that earlier on in the beat hacking section, but this is another tip. So here we go. Yeah, it's kind of weird listening to that, isn't it? But you just want to get to a point where it just sounds like they're sitting on top of each other. Now, if you wanted to make it slightly more difficult for yourself, you could nudge one out, so it's like 28.5 or something like that. And now we're going to do the same thing, so let's just make sure this cue point is right. If you want to jump back to the cue point, you can hit play and hit Q and it'll jump back to the original cue point, okay? So now we're going to do the same thing, but they're going to be slightly out. So now you just got to constantly play with it and try and hear those two kick drums sitting on top of each other. Let's have a quick go. And you get the idea. You just try and keep them on top of each other and nudge it along a little bit, just in case. It's quite good because there might be times where you're playing in the club and they're slightly off. And if you can use your ears to line them without just looking at the beat grid, sometimes that's pretty good. So that's a little thing that you can try there. Now, once you've done that, you can, of course, go and practice this with 2 real tracks. So let me just go and get 2 real tracks loaded in. Okay, so in this next section, we're going to head into probably the most advanced part of this training, which is beat matching by ear with real tracks. Now, this is difficult because when we just beat matched the beats by ear, we didn't know if we were doing it on bars, phrases, anything like that. Now we've got to be able to hear for beats, bars, and phrases. Now, just to kind of give you an example, it's relatively easy to pick out a phrase when we're talking about going from the build to the drop. You know, like the drop is the moment all the drums come in. We'll all know the drop because it's the bit everyone jumps at in the festival. So for example, that moment was the beginning of a phrase. Like it comes in and it hits you. Or for example, the end of an intro. You know, the end of the intro drums, where the drums get stripped away and it goes into the breakdown. It's relatively easy to just hear what this is. It's that moment there, and usually there's like this little drum fill or something that happens just... So you might even just want to go and listen to these different phrases to be able to hear it. Where it becomes more difficult is halfway through the intro drum. So for example, if I went to the beginning of this track here, and I put this point here, and I just beat jumped forward to 8 bars into the intro, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to come back, and we're just going to listen and see if anything changes. And you'll see it cross the screen here, so I'll leave this on the screen so you can see it. Just listen to see if anything changes in the track at this point. Well, is stuff changing, right? Before the drop, there was a little bit of a prelude, like the do, and then when it hit the phrase, more percussive sounds like came in, and it went like this. Have another listen. So you begin to get quite good at this, and so like let me even show you the end, so where it goes into the outro drums here, so you can see I've hit G and H of these 2 points. You'll see that the drums literally get stripped back here, but this isn't about visual, this is about listening. So have a listen and see if you can pinpoint the moment the outro drums come in. Do you hear it? Now this is, I feel like an idiot standing here going, there it was. So little things you can look for is, you'll hear white noise, like build to one of these moments. Sometimes drums will be stripped away at the lot just before it, and then the kick drum will come back in. So have a listen to that white noise and the kick drum being taken away and then being brought back in. And we're back into it again, okay? It's little moments like that you want to hear for. Now this is advanced, and I would suggest you go and get a load of your favorite songs, set 8-bar intervals, and go and watch and listen and see if you hear something change at all these different intervals. This is how you're going to get good at this. So let's beat match this by ear. So I'm going to go to the beginning of this track here. So it sounds like this. And I'm going to literally close the laptop and press play, and at the exact moment I hear that phrase happen, press play on this track and correct it. I'm doing it with the volumes all the way up. It won't be perfect, don't worry. Let's have a listen. Okay, that might not be perfect. Don't worry, we did it. We brought it in at the right moment, we corrected it. Now, I'm just going to make a quick point here that mistake and that correction would have been done with the volume down in my ears, right? I don't even think it's a mistake. It's just like no one's perfect, right? So that would be done in my ears. Secondly, if I was playing live or if I was playing, you know, doing a DJ set for YouTube, I'd be looking at the screen. I'd be looking at my DJ decks. So I wouldn't even have to use my ears to make that correction there. I'd be like, oh, there we go, I'll just correct it there. So that's straight up what would have happened there. But to be honest with you, if you rewound the video and listen to that little mistake I just made, I couldn't care less whether they all heard that fraction of a mistake before I corrected it. Who cares? They're all drunk. They're all drunk. No one has a clue. Sometimes, weirdly, this is a strange thing to say, as a DJ, I actually quite like it when I hear the DJ making mistakes. I'm like, oh, cool, he's actually DJing. You know, like, so there we go. But anyway, so you can just go ahead and practice this. Set intervals at every 8 bars. Go and watch, go and listen, close it, see if you can recognize it happening without even looking, and then move on to actually practicing. This is really advanced. I'm not going any more advanced than that, by the way. That's something that honestly will take years to really perfect, but you can speed it up by doing what I've told you to do here. Nice. Okay, now I've taught you how to do it properly and how to get good at it. Let's talk about something that all DJs seem to love bitching about, which is the sync button. I'll just explain to you what the sync button does. It essentially does a lot of the stuff I just taught you automatically. So for example, I got a track in here that's 125 BPM and a track that's 128. What I can do is, if this track here, the one on the left, is playing, that's essentially the master. That's the one that's playing at the moment. It's the master track. Now, if I came to the other track and hit beat sync, it would do 2 things. It will automatically move this from 128 to 125 to match the BPM of this track, the master track. This is the slave track, this is the master. It will sync it to that. But secondly, when I hit play, it will kind of automatically snap it to the grid for me, which basically makes beat matching very easy. So let's just go a little bit before this outro here. And I'll play it. I'm going to hit sync and then just hit play. And the 2 tracks are completely different, okay? And that's done. That's it. And loads of DJs like to bitch about this and say, oh, you shouldn't use the sync button and stuff like that. Well, my opinion on it is it's so freaking easy to not use it anyway. You might as well. Why would you be reliant on it? You know, just don't. That's my opinion on it. But if you want to use it, use it. Look, we're all using the technology. This is snapped to a grid for us. We are looking at waveforms. We have perfect little tempo sliders here to get it to the exact BPM. I'm just as reliant on this technology as someone using sync, if I'm honest. I'm aware of that. So I've got no, like, I'm not a vinyl DJ who does it all by ear and I'm mixing 2 tracks that were made by people playing instruments and it's really hard. Like, and I've got no interest in being that. Like, all props to you if you are that. But that's not me. I play house music that's made on a computer. Everything's synced. Everything's perfect BPM. So sync button's only a couple of notches off what I'm doing anyway, using the technology to help me. So that's my little take on the sync button. Use it if you want, but honestly, it's easy, and like, so what? You've got to set the tempo slider by yourself and nudge the wheel a little bit if you get it off. That's it. Do it. You know. Now, if you want to get rid of the sync button, you've got to hit it again to deactivate it, but it'll still say 125. So then you've got to kind of like bump around the BPM a little bit until you get back to this point here. Now, that's the sync button, but what I will tell you is it can be used creatively, okay? So let's say we've got one track that's 125 and one track that's 128. The cool thing about using beat sync is once it's done, if I move the tempo slider over here, it will move both tempo sliders and it will lock both tracks. That's very cool. Because it's literally impossible to do that. You can't balance the tempo sliders perfectly. Look how sensitive it is. If you move it a little bit, and it's like, oh, 124.47. Try getting those 2 exactly like that. Forget it. It's impossible. So I'm going to do this example now with a track from 125 to 128. But you could do this with a track that goes from 125 up to 140 if you wanted to. What I'm going to do is use sync, and then essentially just alter the both track speed at the same time. You know, if you were clever with it, you could be doing a fade at the same time. I mean, I'm not going to go into that in too much detail, but I'm just going to show you how this could potentially be used. So let's go back a little bit here. I'm going to press play, hit sync, bring in the track, and then bring the speed of both tracks up at the same time. I'm not even going to do the transition. I'm not going to overcomplicate this demonstration. Oh, one last thing I wanted to mention as well. When you're bringing the speed of the track up, you've got to use the tempo slider from the master track. That's one last thing to say. So let's do it. Hit play, beat sync, hit play, and then yeah. you go. I moved them both while they were synced up from 125 up to 128. And it's impossible to do that without the sync button. So that's pretty awesome. There's one other thing which I want to mention, because I quite like kind of going off piece when I'm teaching you guys. Something that's really clever about the tempo slider that you might not realize is it's locked to a key. Remember I was talking about at the beginning of the video about all songs being in a certain key? Well, typically if you had a vinyl and you slowed it down, it would slow down and it would kind of go all like slow. And you speed it up, would do the opposite. Now you can actually do this. You can, let's take this track here. Okay, so let's just snap it out of BeatSync here. Okay, I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to just kind of make sure it's snapped back. Now watch. If I speed it up and slow it down, the key shouldn't change. And let's put it to an extreme so you can really hear it. I'm going to put it to wide. So it's really going to change, but it will stay in the same key. The music sounds the same. Oh, God, I changed the wrong one. Sorry, I'm wasting everyone's time here. Let's put it on this one instead. Now I can turn this tuning off. So if I go to here, master tempo, I can turn it off. And now when I speed it up and slow it down, it will pitch up and down, which sounds terrible. So I just wanted to point this out. You want to have master tempo on, and how clever is it? How clever is it that we've got technology that we can speed a track up and down and it keeps it at exactly the same key? It's just really clever, this, because you've got to bear in mind, if we were going from 125 to 128 and we didn't have that, all of a sudden the tracks would be clashing and the whole mixing key thing wouldn't work. Now, something to bear in mind as well, which I'm not going to cover in this video, but this can be used to creative effect. So for example, let's say I did have an a cappella. So I've got this vocal here. Now, one way you could use this, and I'm not going to give you the full example of this because it'll take time for me to get another track that's the same BPM and key and stuff like that, but something that James Hype does quite a lot, which I might show you this at the end of the video, is he'll loop a vocal, turn master tempo off, and then pitch it up so the vocal is going. Because remember, when there's ever a riser in a song, it's like a snare, rises, everything's building, and you can use this with a vocal. So let's say we just have this vocal. I'm just going to loop a little part of it. I'm going to half it so it's really quick. Turn tempo slide the master tempo off, and I'll pitch it up.
Hey brother, there's an
See how cool that is? And you could kind of imagine that being on another track. Now, remember, as you speed it up, it will go out of sync. But if you make it really tight, it just becomes like a sound, like a so it doesn't need to be in sync with the other track. Anyway, it's just a little sub thing that I wanted to mention in there. So that's that. Okay, so I want to take a little bit of time now talking about emergency transitions. And it's not really the right term to call them emergency transitions, because you could use these if you were transitioning between different genre of music or massive different BPM ranges. And really, these transitions I'm about to show you now are very, very simple. And if you, like I said, if you're doing like wedding DJing, you're not really going to be able to beat match between tracks, because it's really difficult to beat match between a Michael Jackson track and a Justin Timberlake track. It's just like, the problem is pop songs don't have intros and outros, so they come straight in with vocals and they often end with vocals. You can't blend vocals on top of vocals, it'd be a nightmare. So these kind of transitions now kind of become your bread and butter when it comes to just doing, like open format. And when I mean open format, I mean think like weddings. Like we're going from the Frozen soundtrack to Stevie Wonder. Now we're going to play some 50 Cent, and it's like, ugh. There's no real smooth way to transition between these tracks. There's just not. I'm just being real with you. There's just not. So here's a couple for you. And they're dead simple, these. Okay. So first one down. First one is a couple of concepts for you. Okay. You want to bring in a track at the most memorable moment, the most recognizable moment, okay? That's really important. So for example, I've got a track here and I could play 2 seconds of it and everyone on the planet knows what track it is. Everyone knows it, right? Now I could go back to the beginning of this song, to the beginning drum. No one knows it. I could go even further into the track and play this bit here. No one knows it. So I'm going to, in these moments, find that exact point, which is, as I just said, that's the point where everyone screams when they hear it. Okay, now that's really important for these emergency transitions. Okay, so now, say we've got another track over here, Badadan. I can't play much of these tracks, so I really don't want this video to be taken down for copyright. But say we get right to the end of this track, what you'll often hear at the end of a drop is like a boom, or like a whoosh, or like a like. So have a listen to this track. It's like da da dun da da dun da da dun. It's like a long tail off. It's a phrase. It's the end of the drop. So what I'll do is wait till the phrase, and I'm literally going to filter down, and just as it kind of almost comes to silence, hit play on this other track. Now another thing I'll do here, I'll filter down with these fingers, and then with this finger here, I'll push the volume fader down. So I'm kind of filtering and putting the volume down at the same time. And I'll just practice this. You'll get better at it over time. And let's just do it. Everyone screams. Most basic transition on the planet. There you go. So that's one thing you can do. There's another one called Echo Out. Now, on these DJ decks, it's just an effect. You can go to Pad Effects, and you'll see, well, it's things like backspin. Right? You could essentially use that if you want to do. That's the one which sounds like this. We covered it earlier on. So let's go back to this exact point. You could potentially use backspin. This is the beauty of these kind of decks, having these pre-made settings in there. I've never done this before, but let's give it a go and see what it sounds like. So it's this button here. So that kind of worked as well, didn't it? And there's a load of different ones, but the one we want to look for is Echo Out. Okay, so it's just called Echo. It's not called Echo Out. I think it's called Echo Out on Serato. So let's go and check out this. Let's bring this back a little bit, and here we go. So that's another thing you can do. And now, here's the thing. There's loads of these different effects, and you could just pretty much apply any of them. Just go to Pad Effects, and you could try a load of them out. Now, the one thing I will say is as soon as you move on to CDJ 3000s, you don't have Echo Out at your disposal, which is kind of annoying because I love to Echo Out. And Echo Out, you can use that like almost anywhere in the song, and it kind of works. Honestly, I've put on tracks before in the past, and within the first like 10 seconds, I'm like, this song isn't going to work. I've echoed out and put in another track, you know, like, so I'm just being honest. So, okay, here we go. So, if you don't, and you're on CDJs, and I'm going to do a little section on the CDJs at the end, but what you can do is you could go and just get an effect, reverb. Okay, so we're going to put reverb as the effect here. And what you'll do is you'll set reverb to quite high, and we'll set it to track 1, because we're going to use the same track again. So we come back to here, and at the end of this drop, we're going to activate reverb and then filter it down and out. We're kind of creating our own kind of echo out. In fact, you could create an exact echo out. So you could do reverb, or if you wanted to, you could come to echo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to activate echo. We'll try it with both, and I'm going to activate it and then bring it down. I'm setting it to quite high so it comes in quite aggressively. So we've got to get this track back to the beginning, and let's give this a go. So that's one thing you could do, or you could do it with reverb instead. So we'll come to the top, click this, and we're going to go to reverb. I think reverb actually sounds better, if I'm honest. So we'll go back a little bit here, and we'll do it with reverb instead. So here we go. So anyway, you get the idea. There's a couple of little emergency transitions you can do there, which are just easy things to do from one genre to another. And you might think they seem cheap and they seem a bit tacky, but I'm telling you from experience, they just work. Echo Out is definitely the winner. So there you go. There's a couple of emergency transitions and how to go from extreme BPM ranges and different genres. Okay, guys, so I'm going to briefly touch on doing mashups on your DJ decks. Now, mashups are what we call in the UK a complete faff. They take flipping ages, and you're going to quickly realize why. So when I say I'm going to touch on it, I'm literally going to touch on it. I'm not going to go into a full breakdown of exactly how to do it, because it could be another hour of this video taken up. And really, I can't see many of you doing these mashups kind of anytime soon, and the ones who do want to do it will probably be able to do it from what I'm explaining. First things first, where do you get acapellas from? The answer is YouTube. I'm not going to demonstrate it here. Go to YouTube, type in the top your acapellas. I got one here, 2-pack Hennessy, and just type in 2-pack Hennessy acapella. Go and clip grab it, which I explained earlier in the video. Go and drop it into mixing key, and then you can go and find another track, which could be, you know, I've got one here, Eminem Without Me instrumental. Okay, and I just type in Eminem Without Me instrumental. Find an instrumental on YouTube and then just clip grab it and download it and rip it off YouTube. That's the best way to do it. Now, straight away, I can hear you saying, how do we know what vocals work well with what other tracks? Well, that's really difficult. You basically have to look for tracks that are in a similar key and a similar speed. Rap vocals typically work really well over a lot of things because rapping is just speaking and it's not really singing. So you can find like a 50 Cent in the club, I find works over so many tracks just because it's more like a rhythmic kind of thing than a note. So rap works quite well. So if you're going to start, try it with rap. And then you'll say, well, where do we get ideas from? Well, that again is the difficulty. You just have to kind of have a lot of music, or even better, if you've seen someone else do a mashup, go and do what I'm saying here and follow along with what I'm doing to know it works. You know, I mean, the answer is this. If you've got a good a cappella and you make sure it's going to the grid properly, which I'm going to cover in a second, then you can go to a load of tech house tracks and find loads of tech house tracks that are in that key, and you'll probably find the vocal works well over most of them, as long as the key is correct. Okay, so here we've got this track. Now, the first thing you want to do is make sure both of them are going to the grid. That's pretty obvious with the instrumental. So if I was go to export here and I was go to Eminem Without Me, let's go ahead and do this. So I go and drag it in here and I can see quite clearly as soon as we get to a bit with the beat that it's going to the grid. And you can play it. Oh, it's not playing because it's root. Doesn't matter. You can see it's going to the grid. And any part of the track I go to, you can see it's going to the grid. Now, with the a cappella, this is difficult. You need to, because the computer will try and set it to a BPM, right? And it doesn't really know because there's no beat going to an a cappella. It's just a vocal. So if I'm honest, what I tend to do, and again, I can tell I'm going to lose most of you by saying this, but I put it into Ableton and I make sure it's going to the grid perfectly in Ableton. Because here's the thing. What you could do is, say I've got this track here, a cappella 2-pack Hennessy, right? And I put it in. Well, you could say, well, the first thing you could do is go and find out what the BPM of the original track is. And then you want to go and find out what words land on the one. The one being the first beat of the bar. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's what you want to do. So for example, I went here and I've got to change the settings because let me just go to preferences here. Actually, I'm not going to bother with that. I'm just going to come back over to... I've already showed you how to set the grid, so I'm just going to explain it over here instead. I worry about this part of the video, whether I'm just kind of going into too much detail at this point. And worst thing is I'm not kind of giving enough information, so I'm going to leave most of you scratching your heads anyway. But if I come here and I put this a cappella in here, I can say at this point... Now I was born in the gutter facing life. I was born in the gutter, right? That born lands on the one. Right? And you'll probably be able to figure this out better by listening to the original and counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, and finding that moment. Because he starts by saying, now I was born in the gutter. If I lined up now I was to the first beat, it wouldn't work because the word born is on the 1. Okay, so listen again.
Now I was
Born in the gutter,
facing
life or
death.
death.
I was a thug.
I was a thug. The thug lands on the 1 as well, right? So you've got to go to the original song and find out what word lands on the 1 and find out what the BPM is. Now, again, this is going to be really confusing, but sometimes the BPM of the acapellas isn't the same as the original, and it's very frustrating, which is why I use Ableton to go and warp it and make sure it's perfect, and then I export it out of Ableton if I ever have an acapella that's not very good or slightly strange BPM. Sorry, guys. This is what I mean. This is a faff. This is an absolute faff, right? So we now know born lands on the 1, and we've got it set to the grid, and we've got the BPM right. Now we know that, we can go and put the Without Me instrumental in, and we've got to go and find the moment that there's a 1 in this track. So there, that moment, and you can see this grid, it's not to the grid, that's a 1 right there. So I might come and just set hot point here, right? So we've got 2 tracks. One of them is, what's the BPM of this? Let me just go and have a quick look. Oh, there's not even any key set. This is terrible. I just know these 2 tracks work because I've done this mashup in the past, but you would just go and find the right key by dropping the original of both tracks into mixing key to know what the keys are. So we're beginning to see why this is a nightmare, right? And there's no easy way to do this. There's not like, oh, it's easy, just do this. It's like trial and error, and finally you'll land on something you're like, oh my God, that works really well. And I think your best bet, by the way, is finding a vocal that's around the 120, 130 range, get like an Avicii a cappella, something like that. Then go and get a load of tech house tracks that don't have much singing, because a lot of tech house tracks don't, and then just get the BPMs lined up, make sure you know what word lands on the 1, and trial it with a load of tracks. That's the easiest thing you can do. Or, like I said before, like a hip-hop vocal or something like that. But let's just stick with this now, because we're in it deep at this point. So now we can see this track's 112, and this track is 94. Now the issue is, going from 94 to 112, that won't get there, right? So we've got to increase this all the way to wide, and now it'll get there, but it's going to be really sensitive. So I'm going to put this all the way down to 112, and you'll see how sensitive this is. It's almost impossible to get exactly to 112. So I'll probably just land at that point at 132, and then 112.32, and then I'll come over to this track, and then I'll get this to 32. And I've got to say, the chances of me doing this live are next to nothing. Next to nothing. If I was going to do a mashup live, I would do it on Ableton, get it all sorted, and then just play it out live, knowing full well it was going to be perfect. That's what I would do. I think the only person on the planet who puts acapellas over instrumentals live is James Hype. And, it's a lot of practice and a lot of preparation. He's doing all of this beforehand. I promise you that. When you watch James Hype and he's like, that acapella, that goes over that, that goes over that. Don't think any of it is happening live and he's making it up on the spot. It's all premeditated. He knows what track he's bringing in, over what other track, at exactly what point he's going to bring it in. The way he does it is he kind of clumps 3 or 4 songs together. He's like, right, I know this track goes with this acapella, which will go into this track with this acapella, and they're 4 clumped together, and then he'll put like a marker between every 4 clumps of songs. So it's like every song he plays is like a mini routine. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare, I'm telling you. It's crazy that he does it live, but no one can believe he does it live. Anyway, so let's stick to this. So we've got 132 and 134. Maybe we could bump that down a tiny amount. No, it's too sensitive. So let's just leave it at 131. So now you can, if you wanted to, set a hot cue to land right at the beginning of that vocal. Now, to do this, you have to turn quantize off, because it's going to try and jump to the grid, right? So I could come here and turn quantize off, and then come right to the beginning of this vocal, and then set a hot cue here, and then... But I wouldn't do it that way. I would actually have a hot cue set to the grid. And the reason I'm going to do this is because I know I need to bring it in at this point for it to land on the 1 here. And so I know that if the 1 of this track, I've probably lost you at this point, but if the 1 of this Eminem track lands on is here, I need to bring this track in at this beat here, right? So let's just go back a little bit, and I'm just going to literally kind of tap along, watch the grid, and 1 beat early I'm going to bring in that vocal. Okay, you've got to make sure that MT is selected on both because we've changed the BPMs quite dramatically here. So let's have a listen. And as soon as it's in, I'm going to nudge it along by ear to make sure it fits. It's a lot of effort, guys. It really is. I wish I could tell you it was easier than that, but it's not. There's no website, there's nowhere that's going to tell you this. You just have to have lots of music, lots of acapellas, have some ideas in your head, you know, and really, I think if you want to be doing good mashups, you've got to have good knowledge of Ableton in order to do it. I may have just wasted like 20 minutes of everyone's time. Hopefully you got something out of this remix. As you can see, it's complicated, and for me to run through the entire process with you, sometimes finding a good mashup can take me 2 hours, 3 hours. So why not many people do them? That's mashups for you. And also I touched there upon, you know, James Hype and how he does it, you know, and bear in mind, you know, say this is obviously over a hip hop instrumental, but if this was a tech house track, as the tech house track goes into its build, you can do that thing I said, where as long as they're on the same grid, you can loop them half the speed, and then the vocal can go and you can even get it and pitch it up like I showed you earlier on. And maybe I could go ahead and do that, and maybe you're all screaming at the screen, please show us, Phil, but like it's so much effort, and I feel like I don't want to overwhelm this video, so maybe it was a mistake adding this bit in. So there you go, guys. That's me briefly touching on remixes. Hopefully you can realize it's kind of complicated. It is complicated, but look, I'm going to wrap it up there. Hopefully I taught you something. Hopefully you understood about the vocals landing on the 1 where you go to get acapellas and instrumentals, and I just hope it helps. I'm going to leave it in the video, and hopefully it's helped someone. Finally, guys, I said I was going to jump on the CDJ and point out some kind of major differences between these and the entry-level DJ decks. So the first one is obviously you load your tracks on with a USB. Now, I was going to show you this, but it's relatively straightforward. What you do is you just put the USB in, Rekordbox will recognize it, you get a playlist, and you just right-click on it, and then you go through and say export to USB, and then it appears on your USB. It's very straightforward. I didn't see the point in running you through that. Once you put it in, you can come and just select the USB, and then you go down to playlist, and you can go to, you know, playlist, and it's there, and you can see your BPMs, you can see your key of the track name, and it's all there. Now, of course, you can do touch if you want, or you can just use this, and you load a track in, and there it is. And you can kind of scroll in if you want by zooming in like this or zooming out like that. You can even put your finger on this marker here, which is pretty cool because, for example, you know, we were talking about the phrases earlier on. Well, with CDJs, I can put my finger at the beginning and it'll show me 16 bars to that point, 32 bars to that point, 48 bars. And what's cool about this is, say I wanted to find the outro drum. So I come here and I go, right, okay, this is the outro drum right at this point here. What I'll do is I can find it, it'll say 16 bars to the end, and then it'll give me a countdown here to that point I put my finger on. So you can see how, like, it's quite cool for once you know these 16 bars, and you can kind of go, okay, well, there's the drop there. So there's 16 bars to the end there, and you can start to kind of map it out in your head as you're going through. Another really cool thing is when you've got your headphones plugged in, which I currently don't, but you wouldn't be able to hear it anyway. If you go to browse, you can come to these waveforms and put your finger on the waveform and it'll actually play that bit of that song. So you don't actually have to load it into a track to start playing the song. You can hit it and, you know, like, obviously, I'm not going to do it, but you wouldn't be able to hear it anyway. I'd have to somehow hold my headphones up. But you can literally sample a little bit of the track. So whatever bit you put your finger on, it starts playing that bit of a track, which is really cool. So that's that. You know, you can load these in. Everything else is relatively similar. Play Q button. You can skip forward and back tracks. So you can skip forward in the track if you want here. So I can load the next track in, load the next track in, it'll just go down that list. I can search by just scanning forward or back in a track really quickly like that, which is kind of cool. Which, you know, there's things like reverse mode, where if you put it in reverse mode, it plays it backwards. So like that. And really that mode there is in case there's swear words or anything like that in the track. You can hit it into reverse mode briefly and it'll blank out the swear word. Now, the interesting thing about this is something I didn't touch on earlier on in the video. It's called slip mode. Slip mode is interesting. What happens is when slip mode is on, whatever you do to the track during that time, it will continue to play in the background. So for example, if I had this track now, and I'm going to turn the volume down, press play, and then hit slip mode, I can pause the track if I want, and you'll see this line keeps running. That track is still playing in the background, so when I press play, it jumps back to the place it was going to be. So slip mode means the track just continually plays in the background. So you could do a scratch if you wanted to, or if it brings me back to this reverse mode here, I can put it into reverse slip, where it'll play backwards, but the track will keep playing, and when I take my finger off, it'll snap to where it was. So if there's a swear word in the track, I reverse the swear word, and then it jumps back to where it was. I don't find myself using that very often at all. You've got beat jump right here on the decks, and at the moment it's 32, but I could hit shift and make that 64 or 16 if I wanted to. 32 is 8 bars, so that would be used perfectly. That's the one I'd use most often. Loop in and out, and the exit button here, obvious. These are your hot cues. As I said, there's a slight difference where these, once you hit the hot cue, it just plays. It's trigger mode, so it's not like I take my finger off and it stops playing. I think there is a way to change that now, I just haven't done it yet. But for the longest time using these decks, there was a big difference, which I think is why I actually stopped using hot cues as much. So then you've got, this is quite interesting as well. This is jog wheel adjust. So if I put this to heavy and I did a backspin, it would stop quite quickly. But I can put this to light, and now watch what happens. It just runs and runs and runs. So I usually have it about kind of like 12 o'clock marker there. So that's quite cool. You don't get that on entry-level DJ decks, really. And then there's vinyl speed. So this is, you can change this in the record box settings as well under preferences. But it's basically how quickly the track comes to an end. So I can make it quick, but I can make it really long. You can do that in preferences in record box as well, by the way. And then there's jog mode, which is, you're always going to have it on vinyl. Vinyl is basically what it's like on entry-level DJ decks. If you put it on CDJ mode, it stutters. And I think the reason it did this is because there was probably a time where there wasn't a screen on the CDJs, so you'd be able to find that exact beginning of a kick drum by listening to it. I don't know why it's still there anymore. And finally, guys, we come on to the mixer here. So let me just give you a quick run through. Obviously, we have the crossfader at the bottom. It functions the same way. But, of course, with these different columns or lanes here, you can set them to wherever you want them to be. So I can set them all over to A. So if I go over to B, they all turn off. So, you know, you can set them to A, B, or through. So you can set them however you want. So that's basically that. The next section we've got is the delay section over here. So obviously, we've got whatever effect you want to grab over here. And then you can set it to whatever lane you want. So as you turn this along, you can see which, you know, lane here it's on. And then you've got the different time signatures up here. So this is just an easy way to select a quarter note, eighth note, you know, if it's going on the beat. You know, what I explained earlier on about how the effects actually happen to a grid, to a beat like that. Or you can kind of flick up and down quite easily with this section here, which is the exact same as the entry level decks over there. Now, another thing you can do is you could tap in a BPM if you wanted to. So you could tap it in and it'll be whatever you tap it in. Like, I never really do that. And if you wanted to get it to a specific BPM, you can hold tap and then you can just come all the way down. So I know this track here is 125. So I come all the way down to 125. If I wanted to set it to 125.5, I can hit tap and then auto tap here. And I can set that to 0.5 if I wanted to, but I'm not going to do it because it's not the right BPM. So that's that. The effects can affect different bands. So I can have it just affect the highs if I wanted to. If I deselect the lows and mids and I come to this track, and let's go to the outro of this track. We'll hear it now. If I set it to this and I go to delay and I turn it on, you'll notice if I introduce it, it's just affecting the highs. So if you use delay correctly, you can actually add a bit more of a swing or groove to the track if you wanted to do that by just affecting the highs. I typically don't do it, and on most of the effects I add, I have affect all the effects at once. You know, that's just how I do it. I guess I'm kind of lazy like that. The only other thing is this thing here, time, so you don't have to have it to a specific time. You can just have it to any millisecond you want, so it's not necessarily going to the grid. Now, the only time I'd really use this is if I went to delay. I will typically use an effect where I put delay to 1, and then if I come to the build and then introduce it, it creates this like tinniness to the sound, which creates this kind of like high-pitched frequency. Have a listen. That's a track called Vibrate. Me and Ash made that one as well. Anyway, hopefully you could hear that. So that's the effects. Now the next thing is this filter. It's not by default filter. You have to turn filter on. So now I've selected filter. It will now filter. Now, underneath these filters, there's something called parameter, and this is how much of that effect you hear. So, in the same way I explained earlier in the video, I can increase the resonance of the filter by turning this up. You'll hear this kind of sound. Listen. Whereas if I turn this down, it softens the resonance. We've taken away the which is the resonance, which is the peak of the point where we're filtering up or down. I explained that earlier in the video. So now we've got noise. Noise, again, if I use parameter here, just turns the noise up or down. And noise is essentially a great sound for increasing tension. Anything that goes, anything that builds in sound, anything that goes or repeats or whatever, it creates this tension, which is why white noise is used in most builds of songs. And of course, if you wanted to, you could hit it across the A here and just go, which is the whole James Hype kind of white noise being filtered in, cut in and out. Now, obviously he uses this, but I find it much easier to just tap it in effect like this. That's relatively easy to do. Just put your thumb against it and just slam it like you would like a nail, a hammer hitting a nail. And you can open and close it quite easily. Like that. Cool, so that's that effect. Crush is a cool sound. So crush is basically exactly what it sounds. It kind of makes the sound crushed. It's hard to put like sounds into words sometimes, but if you listen to it, it does it. Now if I filter up, it creates a high-pitched crush sound. I filter down, it creates a low-pitched crush sound. Kind of crunchiness. It almost sounds like an old video game type thing. So that's that. Now, sweep is an interesting one. You sweep up and it creates this kind of delay and reverb, and it also adds that tinniness that I kind of explained when I said you put a delay down to 1 millisecond. Have a listen. But when you actually filter sweep down, it does something really interesting. What it does is it begins to gate the sound. So only the punchier sounds will actually come through and everything else is silenced. Have a listen. You notice that? Like the main sound is the kick. Doom, doom. And as I sweep it down, it just lets the kick through and nothing else. Really cool. I've never really figured out a cool way to use that, but I just like the sound of it. It's like it gets rid of all sounds and just kind of keeps the main bits that are punching through the mix coming out. It gates the sound. So the next thing we got is dub echo. This is basically delay, reverb, and as you turn it up, the delay gets closer together. And if you do it down the other way, it kind of filters it down and does the same thing. It's like it puts the filter on the effect rather than on the track. So you filter it up, it's a high-pitched delay and reverb. The effect is high-pitched delay and reverb, and then the opposite as you filter down. And then finally you've got split space here, and this is essentially similar thing, reverb, delay, and a bit of that kind of tinniness. kind of adds a bit of white noise in. That's what I'd say Space was doing. Delay, reverb, and white noise. Now, as you know, you don't have echo out on these decks, but you could use space or dub echo to create the same kind of effect. So that's how you create an echo out on these DJ decks. So you could do the same with dub echo. Let's go back and try the same thing again. So that's how you do it. Now, obviously, it's kind of interesting because you've got to introduce the effect, allow the effect to take hold and start echoing, and then bring the volume down and then decrease the sound as well. So it's a bit more complicated. I wish there was just a button where you could do echo out. I just wish that these DJ decks have that. I don't know why they don't. But those are those different effects there, and they're pretty cool. Now, there's one final thing which I wanted to touch upon, which is the headphone settings. Now, there's a headphone setting called stereo. That's the one we're all used to, which is where you hit Q, you can hear what the club are hearing, and then you hit the Q button in one of the individual lanes, and you can hear what's happening on that individual lane, right? Now, the issue with that is you're still left trying to differentiate between what the track is that's playing on the lane and what this track is playing in the master, right? So what you can do is you can put it on mono split. What this does is it means whatever's coming out of the master is in your right ear, and whatever's on one of the individual strips, one of the individual lanes, is coming out in your left ear, which is, I've become obsessed with this now. I just really like it. It just feels really clean, and it's good, especially if you've got headphones like this that go in your ear and dampen everything that's being played in a club. You can set the levels to a nice low level, and you can hear quite clearly what's one track and what's the other track. So it's really good. So you put Q on, you'll hear in your ear, right ear, what the club is hearing, and then you hit Q on this lane, and then you can line up the tracks quite nicely because you can hear the beat in both tracks, one ear and then the other. You can clearly define which one is which. Then once you've got it beat matched nicely, you take it off and you start to bring it up. Now, obviously at this point, as soon as you take Q off, you can't hear it in this ear. So you're just mixing with your right ear. But it's really nice because you've already heard the track, so you know what is coming. And as you start to build it up, you can mix really nicely in your ear, and you can have the volume levels nice and low. It's basically the same as, you know, when you see DJs in the club with one ear and one ear exposed and they're doing the mix. Well, it's essentially that, but you get the noise protection from these headphones. I think it works best with these in-ear headphones like this, okay? So that's that. I absolutely love that. It's mono split, and I swear it's made my mixing better. It's like being able to clearly differentiate between the two tracks helps with beat matching, and then helps with mixing as well, being able to clearly hear that one song coming in and, you know, avoiding any frequencies that might be clashing. I just really like it. So there you go, guys. There's the final run through of the CDJ 3000s. I'm actually going to wrap up this video. I've been recording this for about 6 hours. I'm sure the video won't be 6 hours, but I've been doing this for ages now. I'm really hoping that this video does well. I've really poured a lot of information into this, and I want this to be the video that just everybody on the internet will go to watch, to learn how to DJ. I've tried to just give away as much as I possibly can. I really hope you enjoy it. Please leave a comment. Please leave a like. And you know, send it to some buddies who want to learn how to DJ. That's pretty much everything. As I said, just in case you're like, oh, I still want to know more of you, Phil, I do have additional DJ courses before where we'll go into more detail about things like doing mashups and stuff like that, and advanced like DJing live. But really, this should cover the vast majority of it. What I've taught you in this video is what most professional DJs are doing up on festival stages. Like, if you've taken everything I said in this video, you'll be able to DJ at 99% of shows. But if you want, there's courses below. And just in case you do want to get to a point where you're playing big festivals, there's a whole strategy to that. Making music, how to make professional music quickly, how to get signed to record labels, how to grow your audience, how to grow on Spotify, how to get your name out there. One thing that I want to finish with here is that creating songs as a DJ is like buying a lottery ticket. You just need one song to blow up and you could be headlining festivals. And unfortunately, it's probably not what you want to hear, it's the only way to get on festival stage, is having lots of streams and recognition for the music you make. If you want to work with me this year, I'm running a 6-month mentorship program where I will work with you to teach you everything you need to know about producing professional music. And actually, I just said 6 months. It's not. I work with people until they get record deals, which is something that no university, no other coach, no other program out there will guarantee, because I want to make sure that the people I work with get results. So if you're interested, go and open up my Instagram at Phil Harris Music, and you can message me the word main stage or just say, hey Phil, I'm interested in your mentorship, and we can literally chat to see if you're a good fit. I speak to every single person before they sign up. I want to know that I'm working with people who are serious, and if you are, I will teach you everything you need to know to make pro level music. You can go and listen to my music on Spotify. Just go and type in Phil Harris. Really hope this video helped. I don't think there's much more to say. I've been filming for freaking hours. If you're still here, God bless you. See you soon. Ciao.